Hey guys, this evening we're entering a realm of steam and stiff fabrics where the day begins not with the sweet sound of birds or a feeling of peace, but with the smell of coal smoke and a tight corset squeezing your middle. You are about to experience a full day in the life of a Victorian lady. Starting the second your eyes blink open until the moment your private diary is quietly put away. You won't believe the amount of time spent simply maintaining the illusion, acting like you're fine, acting like you're humble, acting like you can take a real breath, and yes, acting like you don't want to scream into a delicate embroidered cushion. So, before we begin, please tap that like button and be sure to subscribe, but only if it feels right to you. Let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Dim those lights, switch on that fan for some ambient atmosphere, and let's ease into this evening's small adventure. You open your eyes before the sun even considers making an appearance. The flames in your bedroom hearth went out ages ago. Your breath forms a visible mist in the icy air. It is bitterly cold. And no, there isn't a system for warming the entire house, just the remnants of coal particles in your chest and the unpleasant stick of yesterday's grime to your bedding. You absolutely cannot begin your morning by tugging the blankets higher. That would simply delay what needs to happen. Somewhere down below, a servant, likely younger than you and twice as exhausted, is rebuilding the flames, warming water, and preparing the kettle. You wouldn't want to switch places with her, but you certainly don't have the privilege of lingering in bed either. The call bell sounds, you respond, and moments afterward she enters with a bowl of water that is always barely tepid, accompanied by your essential undergarments for the day: shift, long hose, underskirt, stays. Oh, those stays. It's time. She helps you into the garment while you stand, barely awake in your nightdress. You grip the bedpost tightly. She pulls the strings tighter and tighter. Your ribcage presses inward, your chest fights for oxygen. You can sense your pulse beating oddly under the strain of the boning. But you cannot tell her to ease up. There's no such thing as insufficiently tight lacing. Your shape must be perfect. Otherwise, what was the point of being born a woman in this family? You sense a cough rising, but you hold it back. That would ruin the entire effect. Next comes the padding, which is essentially a stuffed rear cushion filled with material to achieve that fashionable S shape. If you're unfortunate, it's packed with horsehair that sheds constantly and clings to your stockings. The maid slides your gown over your head, carefully adjusting the sleeves. You try not to notice that she has refrained from making eye contact all morning. That is simply part of the understood routine. If you are of the highest rank, your dress was chosen for you. If you are merely middle class, you still must select something suitable for welcoming 0 guests and not stepping outside, because keeping up appearances is a full-time job. You glance quickly at the looking glass. Do not grin. Do not hunch. The person staring back doesn't look like someone ready to conquer the world. She looks like someone ready to be viewed, but never heard. That is the objective. Now for the gloves. God forbid you handle anything with your bare hands. You hear steps coming up the staircase. Father, husband, brother, it doesn't matter. You must already seem calm, positioned, and acting as if you have been conscious for many hours. Bonus points if your needlework is carefully arranged on your lap, as if you've been quietly stitching. The morning meal is served downstairs, but before that, your hair. If you're lucky, your maid is skilled at this. If you're not, she's at least inventive. Because your hair must be curled, secured, padded, or plaited. Sometimes all of those methods, into a style that shows your social rank, age, and marital status. And if you are hoping for a favourable match, it needs to suggest attractiveness, but never urgency. You try to disregard the tugging, the hairpins press in, your scalp is tender from the previous night's cloth curls twisted tight in a sleep that provided no comfort. You wince slightly. She says nothing. You stay silent too. It is only morning, and your body is already a battlefield of confinement. Metal on your chest, pins in your head, a courteous smile fixed in place where comfort used to be. By the time you stand, completely dressed, flawlessly arranged, and barely able to draw breath, you look like a fragile porcelain figurine, spotless, regulated, and disturbingly delicate. And you still cannot eat. Yet you descend the stairs as if your very skeleton were made of fine china. Because if you were to stumble even slightly, the noise of a false step might provoke questions. Are you feeling unwell? Have you been acting strangely recently? Is there an issue with your stomach? Or worse, with your morals? In Victorian England, a simple scraped knee can somehow become a character defect. Downstairs, the dining area has a slight smell of overdone eggs and thin black tea. The male members of the household are already positioned. Father slowly closes his newspaper, the rustling noise indicating that discussion is now allowed to start, but only if you have the right kind of gentle voice. You are handed a piece of toast without butter. The butter is there, of course, but you'd better not be the first one to take it. You say your thanks, cut a small piece carefully, and chew thoughtfully. Actually eating the food isn't the main goal. Looking refined while you eat, that is the show. If you are married, your husband might comment about the weather. If you are not, the quiet lingers heavy. Your job is to watch and provide a pleasant look. Only talk when you are spoken to. A badly timed comment at breakfast could mean you are left out of dinner. This is the significance of mornings. In your world, they establish the tone for your entire day. You don't control this place. You maintain its standing with your behaviour. Now, if you are not the lady upstairs but a servant below, the situation is flipped, yet somehow more difficult. You've already been labouring for 3 hours, and your stays, if you happen to possess one, is worn and marked with perspiration. You began by starting fires throughout a house that never feels warm, cleaning delicate fabrics your own family could never afford to soil. And perhaps the harshest part, serving food you will never get to sample. While the mistress slowly nibbles at her toast, you are scouring the pan it was prepared in. You master the skill of being unseen, not quiet, because commands are yelled at you all day, but invisible. There is a method to it, moving without creating noise, completing things before you are noticed, vanishing exactly when you must. And if you are very unfortunate, you are what the Victorians called a maid of all work. That is code for absolutely no breaks. One woman performing the tasks of 3 people, washing, cleaning, preparing meals, repairing, watching children, emptying chamber pots, and doing all of this while dodging the master's stare, which might hold too long if no one else is present. A young girl named Lottie once wrote to her sister that she hadn't been seated for 14 hours, her only compensation a small piece of leftover butter and some dry toast consumed alone in the scullery after nightfall, and that was thought of as a decent day. Meanwhile, back upstairs, your breakfast is done. You only rise after the men do, never before. You offer a brief thanks to the cook you didn't speak to, and you return to your own room, not to relax, but to adjust yourself. The stays remain on. You won't be able to take a real deep breath until much later tonight, if at all. On your dressing table sits a small ceramic dish containing lavender water. You touch a small amount onto your throat and wrists. It doesn't really mask the smell of your distress, but it lets you pretend for a short moment that life is simpler than it is. Outside your window, a horse-drawn cart rattles past. Somewhere a factory whistle sounds, a constant reminder that even if you don't exit the house, time is passing and you must keep up. You straighten your spine even more. You verify the pins securing your hair. You smooth the material of your dress. It is time to begin the real part of your day. The part where you smile, consent, and move through a world that likes to act like you don't have a mind of your own. You do not get to decide whether you feel like arranging your hair today. That decision was made long before you were born. A lady's head is thought of as a public display, on show for the entrance mirror, the parlour guests, and the critical eyes of an aunt who recognises the appearance of a girl who is letting herself go. After breakfast, you go back to your dressing room for what is probably the most time-draining performance of the morning. Your hair. If you are wealthy, you sit on a padded stool while your maid begins the routine. She does not inquire what style you would like. She already understands, because last week you requested ringlets and your cousin quietly mentioned that curls are for bold girls. So today it is gentle braids coiled close to your head, refined, restrained, and appropriate for marriage. You flinch as the brush catches on a knot. She tugs. You act like you don't notice the pain. You would think that after years of this your scalp would be tough like hide, but no. Some mornings it seems as if every single strand is connected to your very soul. And then the heated tongs appear. Yes, heated curling irons warmed over a flame and held close to your head by a young woman who has had 1 cup of tea and only 4 hours of sleep. You hold your breath while the metal makes a hissing sound. It smells like burnt tolerance and scorched hair. But you say absolutely nothing, because a well-styled hairstyle is the closest thing to a weapon you will possess today. If you are middle class, you are probably doing this yourself. Your arm feels dead holding the iron up at the correct angle. You try not to jerk away as your own hand betrays you. If you singe your forehead, you will have to spend the entire day acting like it's a beauty spot. And if you are the maid doing the curling, you are not simply arranging a lady's hair, you are carefully shaping her destiny. A loose curl could offend a suitor's mother. A single wayward hair could destroy a marriage proposal. No pressure at all, right? In some homes, hair is washed only once a month. Instead, you brush it every day. 100 strokes. That isn't just about vanity. It's part ceremony, part hygiene, part submission. You bow your head, close your eyes, and give in to the routine. Victorian women often used pads or rats. Yes, that is the real name. They were created from their own shed hair to add volume to buns and braids. You have kept a small cloth pouch of your own fallen strands in a drawer. You are unsure whether that is practical or slightly unsettling. In any case, it is what is required. But here is the greatest challenge. After an hour of heat, pins, rats, combs, oil, and intentionally arranged suffering, your hair must look effortless. Not stiff, not excessive, just naturally perfect. As if you just woke up this way and simply happened to resemble the ideal woman from an illustrated etiquette book. There is no reward, no compliment, only the lack of criticism, which feels strangely like a victory. And then comes the bonnet. Because once your hair is complete, you are required to hide most of it with a cap that resembles a small feathered pastry. If you take it off later, the curls will collapse. If you leave it on, your scalp will feel warm and scratchy. Pick your lesser suffering. You look at your reflection one final time. It is not really you staring back. It is the flawless image of social approval. A woman whose hair took an hour to prepare and who must now act like she is simply heading out without any effort. Downstairs, a maid is still carefully scrubbing hardened wax from yesterday's candlesticks with a mixture of vinegar and salt. Her hair is not arranged, just pulled back tightly and low to keep it entirely out of her face. If it becomes frizzy or slips out of the tie, she will be reprimanded for looking unkempt. And yet she must never appear vain. She can be dismissed for that too. Meanwhile, you, still upstairs, are choosing between 2 brooches. Or rather, acting like you're choosing, because the real choice was made a while ago. The plain brooch implies modesty. The ornate one signals ambition. Neither of these traits is technically wrong, but both can be judged, depending on who you meet. Today, you pick the simple one. It is the safer choice. But now your head aches. Not in a symbolic way, It genuinely throbs. The pins are pressing into your scalp. The braids are pulling hard at the roots. There is a tender spot near your left temple that is bruised from yesterday's elaborate arrangement, but it is thought of as impolite to fix your hair in public, so if it aches, you simply smile and do not touch it. You have mastered the art of smiling with your lips while keeping your eyebrows totally still so as not to upset the exact waves at your hairline. This is the unspoken lesson of stillness, proper posture, lightness of being, and control. The less apparent your physical suffering, the more evident your virtue. But not every woman is taking part in this same social performance. Let us picture you are a young shop worker. Your small wages barely cover the room you rent, in a shared attic with no windows. You have 10 minutes in the morning to do your hair using water from a shared bowl. No mirror and no spare time. And yet, if a single lock of hair drops over your forehead during the day, a customer might call you careless, or worse, your male manager might call it seductive. Hair for you is a source of potential threat. In some factories, women working near dangerous equipment were forced to keep their hair cut very short to avoid being scalped by rotating belts and wheels. There are stories, genuinely terrible ones, where hair was caught and pulled women to their injury. Those stories are whispered softly, not recorded. But every young woman labouring in a textile mill knows them. They braid their hair tighter, wrap it up higher, and pray harder. Back in the drawing room, you check the clock. You have been preparing for almost 2 hours now. You have burned your scalp, pulled out loose hairs, perfumed your neck, curled and recurled, and secured your dignity into a particular shape that will last just long enough to fool 1 or 2 visitors. Why? Because the way you arrange your hair determines how you will be recalled, not only today, but in your lasting memory. Sketches of your profile might be stored in family albums. A tiny painted portrait might display the exact curve of your fringe. In death, your long hair may be cut and shaped into mourning jewellery, placed behind glass, worn on a cousin's brooch. Hair is not just about vanity. Hair is about permanence, and yet you are supposed to behave as though it is completely meaningless. You finally exit your room, your forehead slightly shining, your neck already rigid. You don't know yet whether you will be taking a stroll, making social visits, sitting quietly, or fainting today. But you do know you will be doing it while your skull pounds and your hair refuses to move. The day has only just started. You are prepared to be observed. You make your way toward the breakfast room again, not exactly to eat, but to remain and be noticed. It is still morning, but now your simple presence becomes a performance. The breakfast table has been cleared, the men are absent. The newspaper is neatly folded, as if it was never opened. Crumbs have been swept away, the leftover tea is barely warm. And now, at last, your specific role begins. You sit down with your hands properly folded. A slice of plain toast rests on your plate, untouched. You take a small sip of tea and murmur a polite remark to your mother or chaperone. You are not hungry, and you are not allowed to be. You are available in the social sense. Being noticed at breakfast at the right moment might result in an invitation, and an invitation could result in something more. Security, marriage, stability, or at least fewer uncomfortable questions from Aunt Lydia. There is a specific order to everything. The bread first, then the egg, then maybe a small piece of kipper, but only if someone else begins before you. Everything is carefully planned, unspoken, and filled with quiet nervousness. You are not here to feed yourself. You are here to show that you understand your correct place in the hierarchy. If your family is lower middle class, you might actually eat, but quickly, modestly, and in the kitchen. If you are upper middle class or gentry, you are monitored by the very furniture. The imposing sideboard observes your every move. The portrait of your grandmother seems to frown. And if you are a servant, you serve. You pour the tea. You hold the serving tray. You stand until your back hurts. And once you are dismissed, you rush to the back kitchen for whatever remnants are left. You must not be seen chewing food in the main hallway. That could cost you your job. Meals are not really about the food, they are about the order. Even the table itself shows this. A long mahogany plank, usually with the man at the head and the women arranged along the sides. You are not just sitting down, you are positioned. Positioned according to your birth order, your beauty rank, your usefulness. A less favoured daughter might be seated nearer to the wall. It is never stated out loud, but you notice, and God help you if there is a guest present. Then it becomes all grand show and tension. Your napkin must be exactly folded into your lap before your fingers even touch your fork. Your sleeves must be neither too short nor excessively decorative. Your spoken words must not be louder or brighter than anyone else's. And your polite laugh, always one subtle note below, easily heard. You sometimes wonder if your own voice will simply vanish entirely from a lack of use. You're seated at breakfast, assuming your father is present and he may reference the political headlines from his newspaper. You offer a small nod, lift your teacup to your lips. You maintain a mildly favourable stance on import duties. It seems fitting, yet not too bold. Your brother could mention his studies or his commercial ventures or his newly acquired timepiece. You tell him it's quite nice. You don't probe further. A relative from another branch of the family might deliver a cutting observation about another lady's gown. You don't come to her defence, but you tuck the comment away like a valuable token in your social reserve. You'll undoubtedly require it down the line. You're not really an active voice in the exchange. You're simply the ambient accompaniment. The sole moment you speak freely is when a visitor happens to bring up something exclusively feminine. Maybe the floral arrangement on the shelf, maybe the embroidery on the tablecloth. These are permissible subjects. These are your territories. And if you're clever, genuinely clever, you'll master the skill of steering whole conversations with the smallest compliment. Oh, Mrs. Dalloway's gloves are so daring, you might observe. And instantly you've directed the entire room into a 5-minute argument about propriety. Nicely executed. You're still hungry, of course, but you must behave as though you're not. Because visible appetite is vulgar, and wanting more of anything is a risk to reveal. Now the meal ends, and the genuine evaluation begins. Not of the food, but of possibilities. The men leave first, as is tradition, moving off to important places. Banks, their offices, their clubs. Their footsteps fade down the hallway, like an opportunity you'll never quite receive. You stay behind. Perhaps your mother asks you to summon the tea service. You stand with rehearsed poise, tug the bell cord, and sit back down. All of this is accomplished without lifting your voice or your ambitions, because now comes the second post-breakfast act. If you're unmarried and of the suitable age, every look is a calculated gesture. Your younger sister is wearing that bright yellow gown that makes her appear overly keen. You don't say anything, but your eyebrows reflexively shift. Mother notices it, aunt notices it, and just like that, your worth rises marginally. But recognise this: if you speak too freely, if you jest too recklessly, if you show too much vitality, you'll be labelled as frivolous, a touch theatrical, unsuitable for a spouse. One overly enthusiastic laugh, and suddenly you're the sort of woman who needs strict supervision. It's a delicate equilibrium, so you withdraw into your role as the perfect young lady, graceful, pleasant, proper. You request a servant politely for additional tea, even though it's lukewarm and tastes of letdown. You compliment your cousin's scarf, though its vividness pains your eyes. You nod when the vicar's sermon is referenced, though you nearly dozed off in the pew. Meanwhile, in the cellar, the cook is shouting. The eggs were too liquid for the master, the sausages charred for the mistress, and now the kitchen assistant has to hide her raw hands under her apron. Breakfast lingers for the upper class, but downstairs it's an ordeal that must be dismissed immediately. But up here, in the velvet chairs and the soft rustle of the dresses, everything slows. You're expected to remain, chat lightly, and smile pleasantly at the clock. One girl in your social circle, let's call her Eleanor, once had the nerve to depart early after breakfast, citing a headache. A week later, a rumour spread. nervous disposition, they murmured. Poor girl may not be fit to run a household. She was never asked to that family's garden party again. This is the truth. They don't publish this in the manuals on etiquette. You're not only competing for a husband, you're struggling to preserve your position among the other women. The scrutiny is keener, the sympathy less plentiful. Eventually a calling card arrives, a plain cream rectangle that holds the weight of your whole afternoon. Someone intends to visit. Perhaps a neighbour. Perhaps the mother of a marriageable son. Perhaps, astonishingly, a woman who recently came back from abroad and might, heaven forbid, have her own thoughts. Your mother inspects the card. She nods. Your day is no longer under your control. You stand not because you're dismissed, but because it's time to vanish upstairs once more and get ready to be scrutinised again. Your movements are silent. Your corset creaks softly. You catch a reflection of yourself in the passage mirror and wonder, not for the first time, if anyone would realise if you simply walked outside and kept going. But no. There's toast to nibble at, gloves to choose, and a visitor to charm. And so you go back to your room, not for rest, but to prepare again. Now let's flip the morning and enter a wholly different household. You're still a woman in Victorian England, but there's no parlour here, no servant to secure your corset, no faint scent of lavender water. There's only the bitter smell of lye, the vapour of boiling water, and the sting of cracked red fingers immersed in it. Because this time you're not a lady of the residence. You're a laundress, and your day started before dawn broke. You wake up in a cold, communal space where 6 other women sleep in rotations. There's no chance to comb your hair or sit at a vanity table. Your work apron goes on before your shoes do. Your hands are already rough from yesterday's soap, but the heap of soiled fabrics hasn't shrunk overnight. It never does. You head straight to the wash house, outdoors if you're lucky, in a common alley if you're not. The atmosphere is thick with steam and the acrid smell of human labour. A neighbour is already hunched over a wash tub, her breathing creating little puffs of exhaustion. There's no pleasant conversation here, no decorated napkins or polite tasting of toast. Only grunts, splashing, and the noise of someone cursing quietly because the soap has vanished yet again. Your labour is relentless and invisible, but don't be fooled, it's also vital. You're in charge of making the wealthy women appear spotless, respectable, and delicately perfumed. Without you, their gowns would discolour, their reputations would decline, their husbands would take notice, and no one must permit that to occur. So you scrub with lye, soap that peels the skin from your knuckles with water so hot it feels alive, with brushes that never soften. The scars on your forearms aren't accidents, they're the hazards of your profession. And unlike the ladies upstairs who dread breakfast conversation, your concern comes in the shape of a hem stained with something you can't identify. Because if it doesn't come clean, the housekeeper might hold back your wages, or worse, blame you for negligence. And negligence in a world where employment is limited, and references are everything is a death sentence. You don't work in silence. Around you, other women grumble, exhale, and even sing in hoarse voices. One jokes that her fingers are starting to look like cooked sausages. Another whispers something about blood on a nightgown. Someone else's secret she's now required to wash away. It's a collective burden, but a tough one. You're too drained to connect, too aching to find amusement. By mid-morning, your clothes are drenched, your arms are trembling, and your stomach has been reminding you for an hour that it hasn't seen bread since yesterday's stale crust. But you continue. You wring out heavy sheets that drip onto your boots. You haul water from the pump, each trip feeling like the slow passage of time itself. You hang wet linen across taut ropes, your fingers freezing as they grasp and pin. And maybe, just maybe, you glimpse a refined lady passing by on the street, gloved and perfumed, her parasol the shade of a fresh apricot. You wonder what her hands look like. You wonder if she's ever bled into a bathwater from broken knuckles. You wonder how it feels to rest, but you don't have time for extended daydreams. A child has knocked over the soap basin, your dress is wet again, and there's a second load still to be completed before the midday bell. You thrust your hands back into the water, clench your jaw and scrub, because being tired isn't a valid excuse to stop, not for women like you. By noon, the heat in the wash house is suffocating. Your face is red, not from embarrassment, but from the blistering air and the physical exertion. The back of your dress is soaked. Your corset, if you even possess one, is loosely fastened out of necessity. Not because of a lack of decency. You'd strip it off completely if you weren't afraid of being caught undressed by your employer or some righteous neighbour with a firm opinion. You glance down at your hands. They're swollen and wrinkled, the nails filthy and chipped. Some laundresses massage animal fat into their fingertips at night, hoping to soothe the cracks before they bleed. It rarely helps. One girl in your building, Lucy, lost the tip of her finger to a rusty wash tub edge and couldn't work for 3 days. She was turned out on the 4th. So no, you don't grumble about the cold or the heat or the blood under your nails. You simply work harder. Midday brings a shift, not relief, but a change in pace. The clothes are now wrung, rinsed and hung cleanly onto lines or drying racks. But the hardest part is next, the starching and pressing. The starch mixture is prepared from boiled flour or potatoes, depending on what's on hand, and smells faintly of rot and desperation. You stir it with a wooden tool, then pull collars and cuffs through it before laying them flat to dry. Once dry, it's time for the iron, and Victorian irons aren't convenient tools. They're heavy cast iron blocks heated on a stove or a coal fire. No temperature dial, no margin for error. You test the heat by spitting on the iron surface to see if it hisses. You pray it doesn't scorch the cloth or your arm. Many laundresses carry permanent scars on their forearms from unintended contact with the iron's edge. A moment's distraction can leave a mark that endures years, and if you burn a customer's item, you may have to compensate for it out of wages you haven't yet received. But the worst burn isn't on your skin. It's in the hollow of your stomach. When you overhear the lady of the house complain that her washerwoman left streaks again, as if her perfect blouse simply materialises magically from her wardrobe like a spring blossom, you don't get praise, you get complaints. You press the sleeve of a fine linen shirt, knowing perfectly well the man who owns it wouldn't acknowledge you if you crossed him in the street. He'd see right through you, like smoke. And yet here you are, smoothing the fabric that will rest against his back, closer than any embrace. Sometimes, though, peculiar little tokens tumble from pockets. A forgotten coin, a silk ribbon, a dried flower from a gentleman's letter to a lover. You never steal anything, but you notice. You store these small bits of information in your mind like secrets they remind you. The world above you is built on pretense. The rich pretend to be virtuous. The poor pretend to be invisible. You've scrubbed away the evidence of both by late afternoon. The work eases, but there's no end, only a pause. You still have to sweep the floors, clean the tubs, and bring the now heavy dry linens inside before nightfall. Your back aches, your shoulders are curved. You still have to haul a basket up 2 flights of stairs to your rented attic. And you haven't eaten yet, not properly. But for now, you sit on a stool near the entrance and let the cool air brush your face. And in that single minute, before the next task calls, you remember something unexpected. You're still a woman, not just a washer, not just a body, not just a pair of hands. You're you, even if no one acknowledges it, even if it washes away every morning like suds down a drain. Back in the comfortable sitting rooms of the prosperous world, you've had your tea, your hair is neatly pinned, and your corset is creaking politely with every breath. Now comes the part no one writes poetry about, the hour of the wife. Yes, you're technically at home, but you're not idle. You're the silent centre around which the entire household rotates. Not because you openly wield control, no, that would be improper, but because everything must conform to your orchestrated preference, disguised as gentle suggestion. You start with the household accounts. It sits on your writing desk, bound in old green leather, and it determines the fate of every servant, every vendor, and every misplaced utensil in the house. Your hand cramps as you record figures for meat deliveries, chimney sweeps, new candles, broken chamber pots, coal again. Always coal. You're not meant to understand numbers, but heaven help the butcher if his bill is off by half a shilling. You don't call this work, naturally. That would be unfeminine. You call it managing the household, a subtle performance of diplomacy, pressure, and mental arithmetic with no tolerance for mistake. And then come the staff. Not all at once. They know better than to overwhelm you. Instead, they arrive in waves with questions and requests. Mrs. Graham, the cook, wants to know if she may serve fish on Friday, though it's 2p more costly. Your chambermaid, Jane, asks, stammering, if she may switch her half-day next week to Thursday. The gardener left a note about the rhubarb. The laundry hasn't yet arrived, and someone has torn the corner of the best tablecloth. You answer them all with the polish of a duchess and the tactics of a general. If you're too generous, the cook will order veal for every meal. If you're too harsh, the maids will gossip behind closed doors, and rebellion starts in whispers. This is your tightrope. You learned it from your mother, who once commanded the linen cupboard like a naval officer. You recall how she would trace her finger along the rim of a teacup and whisper, "Only women notice what isn't discussed at the table." So now you check the food storage, not because you're hungry, but because mice can slip through gaps you didn't even know existed. And if your sister-in-law visits and finds insects in the flour, she'll never let you forget it. Downstairs, the staff modify their behaviour. The instant you enter, the kitchen goes quiet. The instant you raise the kettle lid, you pretend not to notice. You're not their friend, you're not their enemy, you're the lady of the house. Or at least you're making a great effort to seem so. Sometimes you wish you could complain to someone about how exhausting it is to always be in command without appearing bossy, about how no one ever praises a smoothly run home, about how people only notice the worn towel or the crooked curtain. But instead you compose a polite note to the fishmonger requesting slightly fresher haddock if possible, and you adjust the drawing room curtains by half an inch, because if the light falls too sharply on the sofa, someone might notice the wear in the embroidery. And then a scandal, a conversation, a judgment, all from the angle of one sunbeam. That's the job. You're both the ruler and the prisoner of this space, and it's barely 11 in the morning. The hour feels endless. You move through the house with a quiet grace that hides the calculations running beneath your silk blouse. There are decorative pillows to fluff, flowers to rearrange, and 100 small tasks that no one notices until they're done incorrectly. You straighten the small cloths on the chairs, not because visitors are expected, but because someone might drop by. And if a caller sees a stain on the fabric, they'll never sit again without silently judging you. You check the cabinet locks. One is loose. You make a mental note to send for the carpenter, but not today. It's Tuesday, and Tuesday is for poultry, not for hammering. If you have children, now is the time to check on them, not to play with them. That would be strange. You visit the nursery, ask the governess how the lessons are going, glance at a half-finished Latin exercise and murmur something vague like, "Very good, dear," while smoothing a loose strand of hair. You ask the nursemaid if the baby's cough has come back and offer a drop of medicine, though the doctor warned you once against being too affectionate. Tenderness is supposed to be managed. Back downstairs, the kitchen helper knocks and delivers the laundry you requested last week. You open the bundle with a mix of hope and dread. If a single table napkin is scorched, the laundress will hear about it. You inspect the lace edge of your best undergarment like a jeweller examining for flaws. One frayed thread, and you sigh as if it were a national crisis. Not because you're uncaring, but because you're the one held accountable for it. You, not the woman who spent hours scrubbing it with boiled starch in a metal tub. If your husband discovers a missing button on his evening shirt, he won't scold the maid, he'll look at you. And so, you anticipate the flaw before it becomes a criticism. That's your burden. That's your real labour. Then let's talk about correspondence. Your morning isn't complete without letters. You retreat to your small writing desk tucked beneath a north-facing window and open the pile. Invitations to decline graciously, thank you notes to send for things you didn't enjoy, and appeals from charities you're expected to support, even though you secretly think they're run by judgmental hypocrites in uncomfortable gloves. You choose the finest pen, uncap the inkwell, and write sentences filled with phrases like obliged and most honoured. And, if convenient, your handwriting is elegant, your opinions filtered through 7 layers of politeness and social disguise. You write slowly, deliberately, with one eye on the blotting paper and one ear listening for footsteps, because if someone enters unexpectedly, you mustn't appear too absorbed. That would be self-centered. Women aren't supposed to look busy unless it's with needlework or children. Somewhere in the house a wooden floorboard creaks. You pause. Ah, the mail has come. You search for international stamps, crisp envelopes, anything exciting. But mostly it's the same. The same names, the same paper, the same small confined lives pass through wax seals. You put the letters away, stretch your tired fingers, and check the clock. It's almost noon. Soon the rhythm will shift again. The luncheon tray will appear, and you'll be expected to assume your next role. The charming hostess, the delicate woman of refined tastes, the quiet presence at the edge of a conversation between men who believe they control the world. But for now, for 1 minute, the house is silent. You close your eyes and imagine a world where no one notices the window. Coverings. Where spoons are irrelevant. Where being a woman doesn't mean managing a realm that pretends it isn't a realm at all. Then you stand, smooth your skirts, and continue because you have duties to attend to, and no one will thank you for performing them. The bell chimes shortly past midday, a crisp, metallic tone that slices the stillness like a refined celestial call. A calling card has been delivered. You resist haste. That would be unseemly. Yet your pulse executes a slight, improper flutter. You walk down the staircase with the measured dignity of someone who has rehearsed this countless times. Because you truly have. Social visits are ceremony, spectacle, trap. Your gloves are already secured. Not the delicate ones, those are reserved for intimate gatherings, but the ivory kid leather set with a bordered seam that whispers, "I am refined but not anxious." Your dress falls properly. Your waist is cinched to exactly the measure of respectable convention, and your face displays soft, agreeable indifference. You step into the parlour and discover her already positioned. Mrs. Audley, of course. The lady who recognises everybody and relishes reminding them. She grips her teacup like a verdict. You settle, scarcely permitting your spine to meet the seat, every sinew alert, every digit bent gracefully around the rim of your teacup. You grin, not excessively. You incline your head, not too keenly. The polite sparring begins. Mrs. Audley remarks on the dreadful damp conditions recently and how it absolutely ruins one's spirits. You concur, though you note how it worked miracles for your garden blooms. She lifts an eyebrow. "Point scored for you then." She moves closer. Her tone lowers. "A fresh household has settled into number 7, she murmurs, and they have employed a French tutor. You inhale sharply, sufficiently to appear intrigued, not scandalised. You drink your tea deliberately, allowing the rumour to hang in the space like fragrance. This is the ritual. You trade identities like tender, remarks like elegant blades. You must seem informed but not meddlesome, entertained but never vulgar. You're traversing a battleground in a crinoline. On the surface between you rests her calling card, cream-coloured with decorated golden borders. It was brought merely 5 minutes earlier, personally conveyed by a servant in a powdered wig 3 sizes too large. The card is her admission into your residence. Yet it is equally her evidence that she has appeared, because here is the peculiar small reality. You distribute calling cards even when the householder is away. Frequently, particularly when the householder is away. For what reason? Because the true purpose is not the encounter, it is being witnessed to have encountered. It is entirely about the record. Indeed, you keep one. Every lady does. A compact leather volume hidden carefully in your correspondence table. Within, every identity, every card, every visit conducted, accepted, reciprocated. You must reciprocate visits within 14 days. Neglecting to do so brands you careless or grimmer, outdated. Your social position is literally chronicled, inscribed in ink and examined like figures at a counting house. And remember, the card itself must conform to standards. The crease at the edge that indicates the visit was conducted personally, your husband's identity inscribed below your own, that suggests he equally attended. An excessively ornate frame, tasteless. A pale card with a modest emblem. Appropriate. Anything with pigment. Heaven help us. Mrs. Audley rises. A faint indentation lingers on the drawing room cushion where she was positioned, yet her attendance has created a stronger impression upon your composure. You produce one final gracious smile, guide her toward the entrance, and express gratitude, acting as though she granted comfort and importance upon your existence instead of subtle condemnations concerning your niece's bearing. The instant the entrance closes, you release your breath, though merely temporarily, because the established custom demands you immediately visit another associate, or chance slipping backward in the inflexible system of social duty. You gather your private supply of visiting cards, still organised flawlessly inside their embellished box, and commence the choosing ritual. Who will obtain your presents this afternoon? No discussion is required. You merely deliver a card and move to the following destination. You are not cultivating companionships. You are preserving your status, one tiny piece of cardstock at a time. The coach rocks softly as you maintain your erect posture within. Card case balanced on your lap, the address already determined. You are not travelling out for afternoon refreshments. You are not departing to browse. You are conducting calls, a term that sounds agreeable, nearly friendly, but in truth operates more like a strategic operation carried out in costly fabric and delicate trim. You will pause at 4 or 5 households, potentially more. If your gloves stay immaculate and your demeanour does not waver, you will effectively prevent any genuine engagement. Perfectly, the ideal visit is one where the individual you are seeing is not present. You present your card to the servant and move along the avenue, your reputation intact and your garments border pristine. But occasionally, regrettably, they are available. The entrance door swings open, a domestic staff member ushers you inside, and suddenly you discover yourself positioned again on a strange sofa, receiving their tepid tea and delivering praise on their draperies. Your ankles should be aligned precisely. Your remarks must be animated without becoming cutting. Your manner must be pleasant without slipping into authentic intimacy. And take care not to speak too frequently or too rarely, too cleverly or too simply. Just previous month, one lady committed the error of mentioning a book she'd completed, an actual piece of literature, and it was not by the approved Sir Walter Scott. Inconceivable. It remains the topic of discussion. Visiting is meant to be brief. 15 minutes is the perfect duration, though it relies on the hostess. You should consistently be the initial to stand, indicating the conclusion of the call. Lingering any further suggests excessive eagerness. You exit back outside. The servant helps you back into the carriage. You arrange your skirts, rapidly inspect your gloves for stray fibres, and select the following card, advancing to number 12. Some ladies find this exhilarating, an opportunity to showcase their wardrobe, their wit, their social confidence. But you do not. You feel like an animated phantom, agreeing, beaming, praising bonnets, and acting as though the environment is not thick with tension. Because one thoughtless remark, one unintended mistake regarding someone's household help, relation, or window treatments, and you could be dismissed. Not merely from the chamber, but from polite circles completely. It has happened previously. Miss Spencer, 2 streets away, ventured to question a gentleman about political matters during a visit. He was merely a remote relative. She intended no harm. Still, within 1 week, her social invitations ceased. Her identity was missing from every guest registry. She currently tends bees. You create a mental reminder to completely avoid the subject of insects. Sometimes, to make the visits more interesting, ladies bring modest gifts. A flower bouquet, a fresh formula, a section of fabric from their recent acquisition. Not from kindness, but for leverage, a minor token to trade for society information. And certainly the whispers, they circulate quietly beneath every encounter, like a hidden stream. Mrs. Kent's fresh domestic uses facial powder. Lady Hartley's spouse is journeying with uncommon regularity. Someone detected a soft tune from a violin in the upper floor of number 9, which is peculiar as they possess no such instrument, and that aged lady in the gloomy residence never removes her gloves. Possibly, they conceal something. A dermal affliction, a lasting scar, a disgrace. You preserve an appearance of detachment. You are thoroughly absorbed. You observe carefully. You retain every particular, because in this elaborate ritual, your silence is not weakness. It is a calculated approach. At last your sequence of visits is finished. You arrive home drained, feeling weather-beaten and delicate from the continuous performance. You strip your gloves with slow, intentional care, as if removing the character you had to embody for the previous 2 hours. You return the card case back into its storage place. You exhale and then address your own stack of recently delivered cards. You document who arrived, who did not, who creased the edge of their card, who forgot to inscribe your identity, and with a small gesture of your pen you create a minor mark next to one, a single dot. A lady whose visit you will not reciprocate. She has no awareness yet, but her place in your sphere has disappeared without a sound. By the moment you arrive from your rounds, the principal parlour is silent once more, the atmosphere faintly weighted with the scent of previous visitors and the remaining odour of courteous conversation. Now starts the time devoted to household duty. Needlework, not because anything genuinely requires fixing, but because a proper lady must constantly appear productive. God forbid anyone imagine you are lazy. So you assume your position near the glass with daylight pouring onto your lap and raise your embroidery hoop. You have already begun a botanical pattern, though it is challenging to differentiate the violet flowers from the small azure ones. They have both been crafted with the same expression of weary duty. You guide the thread through the needle, your fingers still sore from previous correspondence writing. You desire, quite absurdly, for something to genuinely need mending, just so you could repair it. A task with a distinct start and finish, a feeling of actual achievement. But this is not about completing the work, it is about being witnessed, performing it. Evidence that your hands are refined, your hours are organised, and your function is decorative but properly supervised. Each stitch you produce is testimony of your goodness. Needlework is not merely a distraction. It functions as evidence of your ethical standing. If your relative should appear without warning, you will be found with the hoop in your grasp and your eyes appropriately directed downward. If your husband's parent pays a visit, she will discover you repairing hosiery you have already fixed 3 times previously. If your husband enters, he will observe you producing something refined, hushed, and appropriately womanly. Everything anticipated of a Victorian spouse. Sometimes other ladies accompany you to sit and stitch as well, a modest assembly of skirts and implements, each needle travelling through the material while their mouths trade private strands of gossip, concern, envy, and unspoken wishes. I learned Mrs. Grafton's daughter is intending to wed a junior clergyman, one lady states, driving her needle into the cloth with a touch too much strength. Clergymen are impoverished. Another remarks with scorn, she will be compelled to survive on potatoes and heavenly benevolence. They provide soft laughter, certainly, but there is an underlying element, a sensation of gratitude, that this occasion the shocking news is not about you. Needlework functions as a shield. You retreat behind it, you vanish into the fabric. And it safeguards you also from uncomfortable questions, from isolation, from the increasing awareness that none of this thread, none of this trim, none of this effort will ever genuinely be for your own advantage. But even here, regulations exist. You are allowed to embroider cushion covers, modest linens, pillowcases, but nothing overly intricate. You must not produce work that exceeds the standard of the paid domestics, and avoid attempting anything remotely unusual. A flower is permissible, a songbird is adequate, but a spectacled owl or a woman on a bicycle, that is odd, that is dangerous. You remember the account of a girl who stitched an illustration of a woman standing solitary, holding a massive sword. They claim her own father cast it in the flames. So you cautiously stitch a daisy instead, because a daisy is completely secure. Nearby, a governess corrects a young child's Latin declensions. She, also, performs her own type of embroidery, carefully shaping intellects that will never mention her identity. She is unmarried, nearly invisible. The other women do not request her to sit with them, not from cruelty, but out of social caution. She is neither a servant nor a complete lady, neither a danger nor a consolation. Her very existence reminds you of the outcome of falling between the strict boundaries of social rank. You lean nearer to your work, the needle creating a small puncture on your fingertip. A spot of blood emerges on the material. You absorb it away rapidly. No one saw. You continue your stitching, acting as though the wound did not happen. That is the essential talent of a Victorian lady. By now, your fingers work mechanically, in, out, draw. The constant rhythm of the needle has calmed your thoughts into a strange, distant silence. That is where the hazard exists, when your hands are busy, but your mind starts to drift. That is when the fantasies begin. You imagine tossing the hoop aside and marching straight out the entrance door, or perhaps stitching something wildly unsuitable, a mermaid with fins, a pistol, a fox with a cunning smile. Something bold, something that would make the matrons gasp on their tea. But instead you string another pale azure fibre, because you are absolutely aware of what this embroidery circle genuinely is. Not a simple hobby, but a system of examination. A gentle one, adorned with flower patterns and trimmed with decorative lace, but examination regardless. Every lady present understands how to smile while evaluating the state of your cuffs, how to ask about your mother's wellness while inspecting the length of your hem. They watch if your stitching tempo is too sluggish. They watch if you blink too regularly. They detect the way your eyes shift toward the window, as if anticipating someone or something different. You keep your attention concentrated on the hoop. The reality is, needlework is one of the extremely few permitted activities. You are prohibited from possessing property. You cannot vote. You cannot visit a gentleman's club or speak at a town assembly or walk without escort after nightfall. But you are allowed to sew a dozen tiny roses onto a section of linen and be concealed, even praised for it. You can mend your husband's private handkerchief and be called obedient. You can work for hours in complete silence and be commended for your tranquil disposition. That is the deep irony of the circumstance. In a society fixated with demanding quietness from women, needlework becomes both the symbol of submission and the single space where women express themselves freely. Not always with words, but through significant glances, through prolonged pauses, in the narrative exchanged beneath the gentle sound of threads moving through fabric. "Did you learn about Miss Halford?" one lady asks, her eyes never departing her task. "She escaped with a man who labours at the theatre, I learned," another whispers. Not legally wed, a third quietly breathes. A subtle shake of the head, a sharp breath. A shared instant of quietness, a blend of both shock and excitement. And then, back to the routine. Another stitch, another piece of a story traded. Sometimes the gossip suddenly turns back to you. You can sense it moving around the room like a cold breeze. You were spotted at the neighbourhood bakery. You were heard expressing a somewhat animated viewpoint. Someone saw you reading a work of fiction alone in a communal space. Your needle moves with increasing swiftness. You think of your aged aunt who once insisted a woman's genuine nature could be measured by how well she made buttonholes. You found that amusing at the time. You assumed it was humorous. You grasp the meaning entirely now. In another section of the city, beyond shut windows and shadowed glass, other women are also sewing. Seamstresses bent over their working tables, their hands calloused from the endless stitching, their spines permanently arched from hunching forward. They possess no elegant drawing rooms. They possess no plush cushions, but they create your intricate dresses. They complete your sleeves. They provide tangible form to the very style by which you will be evaluated. You question whether their needle slips when they grow weary, if they ever weep onto the cloth. You question whether they sew as you do, in total silence, but imagine loud things. The sun has shifted position. Your embroidery hoop now projects a perfect round shadow upon your dress. Someone suggests calling for a fresh pot of tea. Another woman announces she must depart, her daughter will shortly return from her lessons. The intimate group disperses. You cautiously roll your work into a tidy, compact cylinder and tuck it into your sewing basket. You rise to your feet, your knees aching somewhat, and give a final smile. The blossom is now finished. Tomorrow you will start a new one, because the demand for needlework is constant, and the social display never actually ends. The garden path directs your footsteps back toward the side entrance. You walk intentionally now, as if prolonging this instant might somehow postpone returning to the social gathering inside, yet the gravel stops. The carved stone steps begin. You ascend them like a performer exiting the stage. Your fingers brush the railing. You pass the threshold into the shadowy entrance hall where your body can at last, relax a bit. Behind you, the housekeeper shuts the door. You allow yourself one brief, quiet sigh, and then you straighten yourself once more because the parlour awaits and you're supposed to appear as if you've merely floated in on a soft breeze. But before you return to the guests, you stop in the corridor and examine your reflection in the mirror. There you are, hat somewhat askew, cheeks a touch too flushed, one small lock of hair threatening to slip from your meticulously arranged style. You tuck it back, not because the minor disarray troubles you, but because someone else would see it, and their opinion matters more than your own ease. In a world apart from this one, just a street away, a factory worker trudges through dense mud, shoulders hunched, skirt soaked up to her knees. No parasol, no groomed pathway, no judgment, at least not the type that tracks you all the way through formal dinners. She walks with intention. Nobody minds how filthy her shoes appear when she arrives, but you aren't allowed to arrive, only to appear as if you were always already there. Flawless, elegant, perfect. Back in the central room, someone hands you a glass of sugared beverage. You take a taste, you acknowledge, you praise a dress you find unappealing, and you ease back into your usual seat, back erect, ankles properly crossed, readying for the next act. The afternoon is not over, and neither is the performance. The late afternoon sun pours across the carpet now, extending out, a warm amber, and just slightly too warm. The house settles into that particular style of Victorian silence, so deep it becomes suffocating. A stillness made of clocks ticking, distant footsteps, the occasional gentle touch of fine porcelain from the kitchen area. You arrange yourself on the long couch with a volume, not because you urgently want to read, but because reading, when done with grace, makes you seem cultured, refined, lost in contemplation, and safely unthreatening. The volume in your hands is poetry. It must be. Fiction is frowned upon in certain circles, especially the modern kind, filled with passion, independence, and heaven forbid, women with firm opinions. Poetry is safer, particularly if it rhymes pleasantly. You hold the book open just enough so the gold edges capture the light. You flip the pages carefully, with reverence. You read the same verse 4 times because your attention keeps drifting, not to the words, but to the sound of a door shutting upstairs or a footfall that makes you wonder who might be entering unexpectedly. You make yourself focus. The verse is about a small bird, or perhaps a brook, something gently sorrowful. Your bearing is impeccable. If someone enters, they will see a cultured young woman engaged in elevated reflection, not a woman utterly exhausted. You do not adjust your position, you do not prop your chin on your palm. That would be too relaxed. No, you must look like a painted portrait, all gentle contours and serene composure. And that is the maddening part. You are not reading to genuinely escape, you are reading to perform the escape. And paradoxically, there are regulations even for this activity. One hand holding the book, the other lightly grazing the edge of the page, head gently tilted, lips slightly separated. You are supposed to resemble a painting that may eventually hang in the hallway of a relative's home. Portrait of a woman at leisure. The irony is that you are not at leisure. You are labouring. Always. Even during this alleged moment of rest, you are toiling under thick layers of expectation. Because reading is acceptable, certainly, but only if it's not too vocal, too rapid, too frequent. A girl who devours too many books is suspect. A girl who quotes from her books at supper is noted. A girl who questions the substance of her reading. Hazardous. There is a story about a young woman who once read Darwin, then questioned a clergyman about it during a tea gathering. She was dispatched to live with a relative in the north indefinitely. You keep that tale folded securely in your consciousness, like a pressed flower between pages, a constant reminder. Your fingertip rests on a line discussing deep longing. You do not dare to experience it too intensely. Instead, you commit it to memory so that later, when asked about your reading, you can quote something appropriate, something unclear, something that implies you were thinking about tiny songbirds and not about the confining circumstances you occupy. At the opposite end of the room, your mother sorts through bright embroidery threads. She does not disturb you. That would be improper, but she looks up, occasionally, monitoring to see where you are in the volume. Too fast, and she will worry about your mental condition. Too slow, and she will worry about your lack of vitality. This is the impossible tightrope walk, to read just enough to seem intelligent, but never enough to seem ravenous. You redirect your focus back to the book. The page has been turned, but you cannot remember what it said. As the daylight drops lower, throwing diagonal beams of light across the patterned wallpaper, you finally close the volume, not because you have finished the end, but because you have held it for a proper duration to make your point. Any longer, and someone might assume you actually derive pleasure in reading, which is troubling. You place the book precisely so, on the small side table, front facing up, spine absolutely straight, as if it too is merely a piece of the decoration. Then you stand gracefully, gradually. You stretch, but only in the discreet way a lady is allowed to stretch. Barely, with a gentle turn of the neck and a shift of the shoulders, like a stately bird grooming its feathers. Your limbs feel stiff. Your structured undergarment protests faintly as you adjust your weight. You want to yawn openly, but you stifle it entirely. Reading, after all, is rather exhausting, but it is nothing compared to what happens when you neglect to perform it. There was a girl, Eliza, you believe her name was, who never developed a taste for reading, or at least never acted like it. She preferred walks in the garden, drawing animals, composing short poems privately, that might have been wonderful if she had not once stated aloud that she found Wordsworth boring. She is married now, to a man 20 years older who runs a large brewery and dislikes dogs. You wonder if she still composes her verses. Reading is, in some ways, your defensive armour. You think of the governess upstairs right now, probably reading too, but without the luxury, the parlour, the quiet. She reads late at night, in the short time between reviewing a child's handwriting and repairing her own clothes. Her books are borrowed, frequently returned with pages torn. No one commends her for reading, they expect it. Her reading is not for show, it is genuine escape. You envy her somewhat for that reason. There is something genuinely dangerous about reading for actual meaning. You felt it once, privately, when one sentence grabbed hold of something deep within you, a passage that made you feel truly recognised, that felt as if it had been written by someone looking through time directly into your very soul. But you gently folded the page, closed the volume and stored it away, because allowing a book to change you is as risky as letting a corset loosen in public. Nobody wants to witness a woman revealed, not really. So instead you collect little sentences, fragments, harmless bits of verse you can casually mention at gatherings. A line about the moon, a poetic description involving flowers. Nothing that could ever be read as deep longing or discontent. Even your choice of books is selected for the main drawing room. Your father once gave you a thick volume of Milton with a note that read, "Strong minds need strong poetry." You read 3 pages and wept, not because of the words themselves, but because of the brief instant he truly understood you. Then he never brought it up again. Now you mostly read what is expected, what is visually pleasing, what will seem suitable, casually left on the piano. But sometimes, when you are certain no one is watching, you return to the pages that feel forbidden. The ones with angry women or lonely women or intelligent women who ask difficult questions that echo long after the book is shut. You never speak their names out loud. You just keep them tucked into your memory like a secret detail pressed between your gloves. Because books may be bound, but you are not as firmly held together as they think, not yet. Upstairs, just beyond the 2nd floor landing, where the air feels cooler and the wallpaper slightly peels at the corners, lives a woman who eats by herself, sleeps by herself, and smiles only when the children master their French grammar rules correctly. She is the governess, and today we will enter her reality, or rather, her heavy, practical footwear. You walk the corridor to her small room, positioned near the children's room, but never quite in it, close enough to be summoned quickly, far enough to remain separate. That notion, separate, defines her existence. You enter her small space. It is narrow, highly organised, a place of few possessions and quiet dignity. There is a small writing desk with 3 books stacked carefully, grammar texts, geography guides, and something partially read and personally treasured. There is a large wooden trunk under her bed. She has possessed it since she was 16 years old. Her plain dress is dark, modest, meant to be unnoticeable, and so is she. As the governess, you inhabit an unusual middle space. Not exactly a servant, yet not a lady. Not paid enough to live well, not quite respected enough to marry well. You eat your meals with the children, never with the family. You teach on etiquette you are not permitted to practice. You attend church services, but you sit in a seat in the very rear. You hear the dinner conversations, but only through the thick walls. In short, you are necessary and yet completely invisible. You wake up early, before the nursemaid, before the first morning bell. You dress quickly, no corsets, no elaborate silk layers, just sturdy wool and plain cotton and pure practicality. You brush your own hair, tie it back plainly, and start the day with arithmetic problems. Your students are delightful sometimes. Other times, they are small dictators in delicate lace. They pinch, they invent excuses. They whine of boredom after just 5 minutes of spelling drills. But you endure it, because you are under constant assessment too. If a child misbehaves, it is your fault. If they miss a lesson, it is your carelessness. If they lag behind in their Latin, you are not achieving the expected standard. And yet, when the child perfectly recites a passage from the works of Julius Caesar at supper, no one gives you credit. They credit the child. The father grins broadly. The mother carefully dabs her eyes. You remain completely in the background. You silently mark the next homework assignment. At midday, you escort the children into the garden, but not for simple recreation. This represents hands-on learning. They must accurately identify 5 species of trees and 3 types of birds before they are allowed to run freely. One of them falls into the mud. You carefully clean their small boots. Later, you do not sigh deeply, you do not display any frustration. You produce that practiced governor smile, the one that quietly communicates, "I am not here to create problems, I am only here to be useful." But you are deeply tired, not because of the actual teaching work, but from the constant balancing act. The continuous, moment-by-moment, struggle to be stern but not harsh in nature, educated but not intimidating, caring but never motherly. Because if you form too strong an attachment for the children, that is judged inappropriate. If you become too emotionally detached, that is considered cruel. One governess in the countryside was dismissed for holding a child's hand for too extended a period, another for merely refusing to do so. You finish the morning's lessons in the schoolroom. The older child yawns broadly, the younger one absently chews on a large ink blotter. You suppress the intense urge to scream. You tell them to recite their prepared poetry again. They complain softly, but you persist, because you are expected to be a pillar of endless patience, and you must be perfect, or you will be let go. School afternoons stretch endlessly like heavy, damp fabric. The students grow increasingly restless, constantly shifting in their seats, jabbing one another with pointed pen nibs, inventing reasons to escape the cramped classroom. You distribute penmanship exercises just to claim 5 precious moments of quiet respite. Your eyes lift toward the substantial timepiece resting on the shelf. It has barely crossed 2 in the afternoon. You have exchanged words with no other grown person since breakfast. And even that brief interaction consisted merely of the household manager grumbling about insufficient firewood. This particular aspect of serving as a governess receives no mention from anyone. The exhausting work itself does not destroy your spirit, rather it is the profound loneliness. Other humans surround you constantly throughout each day, yet you exist in complete solitude. The family does not consider you one of their own. The household workers do not view you as their equal. You drift through the lengthy hallway like an apparition, noticed only when required and otherwise entirely overlooked like some forgotten ornamental fixture. When the evening meal arrives, you consume it in absolute isolation within your modest quarters, served on a single tray. A thin portion of cold meat, a stale crust of bread, sometimes a basic broth. You cannot share meals with the affluent household. Doing so would compromise the rigidly established class separation, yet you are equally forbidden from joining the staff. They presume you consider their work beneath your station. Maybe you do somewhat, though primarily because you fear they might be right when they quietly mock you and call you a false aristocrat. No genuine space exists for your belonging, not really. And since you possess education, which remains essential for effective instruction, you experience the terrible absence of meaningful connection like a constant bodily discomfort. Nobody available for conversations about significant concepts, nobody to share stimulating literature with. Nobody who genuinely acknowledges that you once accurately rendered Virgil into English or learned by heart numerous sonnets from Shakespeare's celebrated collection. Occasionally, when the students have retired for the night or departed for their instrumental training, you cautiously retrieve your private book, the one you maintain safely concealed underneath your sewing supplies. This afternoon, it happens to be a love story. The following day, it could be a substantial collection of philosophical writings, something with substance, something that powerfully confirms you remain a conscious, thinking individual. You study near the glass panes, your gaze flicking upward repeatedly to verify absolutely nobody is watching. A governess discovered completely engrossed in fiction faces immediate termination for unacceptable personal pleasure. This precise fate befell a woman you once knew personally. Her sole transgression was reading the book Jane Eyre. The profound irony nearly ruined her completely. On one occasion, a visiting guest at this property inquired about your particular views regarding the reform legislation. You responded truthfully, likely too truthfully. He offered a courteous smile, though you detected the immediate coldness in his wife's expression directly following. Nobody has sought your political perspectives since that episode. Therefore, now you vocalize only when it becomes absolutely essential. Your teaching content remains pleasant and entirely unobjectionable. You admire the students' thoroughly unremarkable drawings. You applaud their verbal presentations even when they clearly falter. You respond, "Yes, miss," and "No, sir," and that will be quite acceptable. You have gradually yet certainly mastered the art of appearing considerably smaller, considerably more subdued, ensuring you are never mistakenly regarded as a possible danger. Nevertheless, you continue to allow yourself fantasies. Not about luxurious material goods, not about elaborate dances or impressive social standing, simply about receiving proper recognition, about somebody inquiring how your day actually unfolded and sincerely hearing the comprehensive response, about consuming a meal at a communal table where somebody courteously serves your beverage, about having permission to laugh without restriction, not the measured, hushed little sound of mild entertainment you employ currently, but a full, freeing laugh. You swiftly hide in the book from view. The students are presently returning from their rigorous instrumental instruction. You methodically adjust your plain neckline, you smile cordially, and mere seconds before they energetically enter, you permit yourself one last contemplation. You certainly are not the protagonist of this impressive residence. You do not even qualify as a notable supporting character. You are simply the marginal annotation, the soundless figure, the vital hand that carefully moulds the coming generation, yet is definitely never included in the primary narrative. Still, you firmly grasp your teaching implement. Still, you persistently educate. Still you stay present. Because for certain women, merely existing near the glowing hearth, even at its absolute outer boundary, remains infinitely better than suffering complete exposure to the harsh, merciless darkness. There exists a particular quality of motionlessness that descends heavily upon the late Victorian afternoon. The variety that amplifies the steady clock rhythm makes the diagonal sunshine appear considerably weaker and causes your own tightly bound body to feel somewhat too constricting. It represents precisely the moment when women of respectable society are expected to be thoroughly comfortable. Yet you are silently struggling. You occupy uncomfortably a seat that proves slightly too rigid, dressed in garments slightly too confining within an existence slightly too severely controlled. And there exists simply no acceptable or elegant method to express this. Yet you feel deeply troubled, not genuinely ill, not completely healthy either, something hovering between. Somewhat lightheaded, somewhat physically exhausted, somewhat extremely tense. That recognizable term once more, nerves, the useful multi-purpose expression, representing every silent anguish a woman must politely contain. You look down at your hands, entirely motionless. You clasp them firmly in your lap and contemplate silently whether they will abruptly expose you, jerk unexpectedly, shake uncontrollably, disclose your actual condition. It must be the corset, you resolutely persuade yourself. You have not drawn a complete, satisfying breath in more than 5 hours, or maybe it represents the stifling temperature or how your boning has pushed painfully against the bottom of your vertebral column and rendered your head strangely weightless and detached. Nevertheless, you will not release anything even marginally, because doing so would mean admitting undeniable frailty, and frailty draws unwelcome notice, and notice in this severely judgmental society represents a legitimate threat. Therefore, you straighten up even further and feign ignorance of the persistent humming behind your tired eyes. In the remotest section of the room, Aunt Margaret exhales audibly. "Oh, unfortunate child," she softly murmurs. "You appear quite visibly ill. Perhaps a brief interval of repose." You offer a slight nod. She sounds the little bell for refreshments and kindly suggests a harsh tonic, something murky brown with an odour similar to wood treatment. You take a measured sip of it. It achieves nothing whatsoever except to verify to everyone else occupying the room that you are conducting yourself exactly as anticipated. After all, respectable Victorian women are definitely not meant to experience authentic rage or unmanageable agitation, or overwhelming hopelessness. Yet a rapid fainting spell that remains perfectly allowable, that proves practically stylish. It is even implicitly anticipated. You have encountered stories of women who maintain a designated fainting sofa beside every individual window, of women who withdraw to their personal chambers with the nerves and stay there until supper, emerging even more pallid and subdued, and somehow even more highly desired for matrimony. You privately question whether you are gradually transforming into one of them, or worse, becoming commonly recognized as one of them. It commences with one abrupt headache, one passing instance of dizzy faintness at a straightforward musical recital. Then somebody references it to the neighbourhood clergyman's spouse. Then somebody else rapidly relays it onward. Before you completely understand what is transpiring, people begin courteously volunteering to transport all your modest parcels, arrange your chair for you, inviting your younger sibling on extended walks rather than you, and then you are formally the fragile one, which would not be altogether dreadful, except vulnerability in a woman is exactly like a beautiful rose abandoned outside after dark. Initially it is undeniably appealing, then it is quickly withered, then it is ruthlessly discarded. Therefore you endeavour intensely not to faint, not to shake visibly, to courteously smile through the substantial pressure on your chest and pretend it is simply your restrictive bodice fitting improperly. You attempt desperately to remember who you were before the profound sighs started, before the heavily loaded word nervous entered your mother's letters, before the physician with the excessively slick hair and continuously pale hands began appearing regularly after worship simply to examine you. You understand precisely what he will declare if this continues to deteriorate. You have heard it privately mentioned at numerous garden gatherings. Hysteria, that dreadful word, all sharp consonants and even sharper catastrophic implications. Because hysteria is significantly more than a straightforward medical determination. It is a definite verdict to absolute isolation, to universal mockery, to violent ice treatments and severe mustard applications, and a minuscule abandoned room at the remotest end of the extended corridor where women are dispatched to supposedly recover and never quite revert to their previous selves. And therefore you do exactly what all women like you are thoroughly trained to do. You flawlessly conceal it. You bind up even more severely, smile even more broadly, speak even more gently. And when you are confident nobody is watching, you silently press your pointed nails into your tender palm, not to intentionally inflict pain, simply to sense something undeniably tangible and genuine. It is mid-afternoon, the atmosphere is dense and motionless, you are physically immobile, yet your thoughts are violently struggling, and nobody, not even yourself, can precisely identify the stifling thing you are submerging in. By later afternoon, the original dizziness transforms into something completely different, a distinct, desperate fluttering in your chest area, as if a tiny, frightened bird is frantically beating against your delicate ribs. You gradually stand from the substantial chair, genuinely hoping that basic movement will reduce the sensation, yet the whole room appears to abruptly tilt ever so marginally. The intricate wallpaper feels disturbingly near, the atmosphere unbearably oppressive. Somebody observes, unavoidably. They inevitably do. Mrs. Pembroke, who lives 3 blocks distant and is presently visiting this afternoon, gasps with a variety of pleased alarm. "Oh, my unfortunate girl, you appear dreadfully pale. Sit down, immediately now." And precisely like that abrupt instant, you have transformed into the unforeseen central attraction of the whole afternoon. The responsive maid hurries out to obtain smelling salts. Aunt Margaret starts to fan you energetically with a folded copy of the Lady's Journal. A concerned cousin lingers adjacent, proposing cold water. It is not that they authentically desire you to be sick, yet your abrupt weakness supplies them with something active to accomplish, something interesting to discuss later, something that renders them temporarily helpful and significant. You weakly attempt to maintain that you are completely fine, that it is simply the oppressive climate, or possibly the abrupt stimulation of the extended day. Yet they have already reached their conclusion. You have experienced an episode, a nervous turn, a moment. That significant word once more, moment. In this extremely stylized society, a solitary moment can either completely destroy you or spectacularly save you. A moment renders you fascinating, exposed, noticeably softened. Precisely the variety of men feel immediately driven to safeguard, and other women feel completely driven to continuously discuss. You inhale in brief, superficial gasps as the sharp-smelling salts violently burn your sensitive nose. The intense ammonia stings severely, powerful enough to make your eyes tear involuntarily. You cough once, then a subsequent time. Everyone instantly loosens their posture. "There now," says Mrs. Pembroke, with the apparent tone of somebody who has just effectively won a round of cards. All better, all better. Two entirely empty words that signify absolutely nothing whatsoever. They persist talking quietly for a few additional minutes, speaking softly now, as if you might entirely fracture if the ambient conversation becomes too loud or pointed. You nod marginally, smile weakly, and accept the kind offer of a plain biscuit. You are now formally regarded as delicate. That is a standing that adheres to you like moist, delicate lace. By tomorrow's sunrise, the account will have circulated far and wide. "Did you hear the awful news? Poor thing nearly fainted once more. Such deep nerves, such extreme sensitivity." Your name will softly float in refined parlours matched constantly with flattering descriptors like sweet, frail, and melancholic. You sip your tepid tea in complete silence, already feeling yourself diminishing internally. Yet there is a second, underlying reality humming beneath this delicate performance. A quieter, much harsher one. Victorian-era physicians have essentially transformed women's very authentic pain into a kind of distorted poetry. They classify your absolute exhaustion a feminine temperament, your debilitating migraines overexcitement of the imagination, your abrupt heart palpitations an excess of uncontrollable emotion. They have even proceeded so far as to create strange machines, small buzzing, whirring devices designed to relieve hysteria in their female patients. Nobody dares to call that outright madness, naturally. That is simply treatment. You sit completely still, permitting the tea to become entirely cold in your small gloved hand. You cannot quite determine what is genuinely worse, that you have become reduced to a simple symptom, or that you are expected to make that suffering appear somehow beautiful and appealing. From this day onward, you will be regularly instructed to rest. Not to walk too rapidly, not to read too hungrily, not to allow your challenging thoughts to run entirely wild as if your active mind were simply a wild animal that must be continuously contained in a cage. Yet you understand the undeniable reality. Your deeply personal thoughts are completely all you have left remaining. Therefore you hold on to them tightly. Quietly, meticulously, you write them all down. In the miniature leather-bound notebook carefully concealed inside your writing desk, the one securely wrapped in ribbon and tied very tight, you will discover secret defiance there, your invisible, powerful pulse. The next time somebody politely says, "You poor dear, your nerves," you will simply nod your head. You will even offer them a polite thank you. Yet deep inside your mind, you will vividly think of that small trapped bird in your chest, and you will smile slightly because it is still alive and struggling. And so are you. Evening does not commence with the setting sun, but rather with rising steam. You have successfully navigated through the extended, agonizing hours of silent internal panic and gentle, insidious judgments. Now it is time for the final grand illusion of restful repose. If you are fortunate or perhaps unfortunate enough to be a member of the wealthiest social set, you are formally summoned for your meticulous evening routine. Your diligent maid steps through the doorway, her hands clutching freshly warmed towels and fragile glass containers brimming with curious fragrant solutions. The space immediately becomes saturated with the aroma of lavender essence, pungent ammonia, and just the slightest hidden hint of pure panic. You remain frozen before the elaborate vanity mirror. She starts systematically with your complicated hairstyle, carefully combing through the rigid spirals, delicately rewinding the detailed braids, softly extracting the numerous fasteners from your remarkably sensitive scalp. You flinch quietly just once. She skillfully pretends to have overlooked everything entirely. Next arrives the necessary facial washing. Not ordinary soap, not anything even remotely straightforward. Rather dense cold cream made from whale oil, a clarifying liquid with substantial alcohol concentration and tightening properties. Rose fragrance, if luck permits. Though several households depend on something harsher, like mercury. Yes, mercury, only the tiniest amount. Applied in a cream massaged in to whiten the skin tone. Pale suggests purity, pale indicates flawlessness. Pale implies suitability for matrimony. Never mind that it destroys the skin's texture. Never mind the uncomfortable feeling. Your face must not flush, it needs to delicately glow, so you use it. Not from pride, but because your complete value might depend on how translucent the skin across your cheekbone appears, under the glow of a candle. During the evening gathering, your eyelashes are darkened, not with cosmetic colour, which hasn't been invented yet, but with lamp residue, a delicate ash combined with a little saliva from your lips, applied with a fingertip, carefully. Your mouth, pressed, not tinted, that would draw criticism. But a swift, concealed pinch before stepping into the drawing room provides them just sufficient colour to suggest health, not starvation. Your gown for the evening is already laid out on the mattress. Tailored silk, cut low at the chest, but modest. The kind of attire that suggests wealth without announcing lust. You slip into it with practiced efficiency. The servant fastens the clasps running up your spine. You extend your limbs just enough to feel the firm restriction of fabric across your backbone. Your confidence in position transformed. When you walk down the staircase for dinner, you are a completely different creature. The fragile girl with a pounding heart and lightheadedness is vanished. In her position stands a vision. Poised, controlled, scented, faintly shimmering with fine oil and soft powder. You float into the parlour as though you have never known a moment of difficulty. That is the requirement, because this is the time when women are expected to be ornamentation. You will not serve the wine, you will not carry the platters, you will not initiate the conversation, you will instead provide atmosphere. You will grin with just the right balance of intrigue and moderation. You will chuckle graciously when one of the senior gentlemen mistakenly quotes a writer. You will incline your neck when someone references the monarch's latest condition. And you will endure the silent stares, the ones that measure your throat like an invisible collar, the ones that calculate your fortune. Behind pleasant eyes, you are not here to eat. You are present to be viewed. The dining room glows with gaslight. The atmosphere is thick with savoury food smells and gleaming silverware. But your hunger is entirely absent. You settle in your designated chair, palms resting delicately beside your utensils, spine straight like you were instructed since infancy. A gentleman to your left inquires your thoughts of the latest climate. You respond it has been temperate, but the gardens need moisture. He agrees and does not remember your name. Opposite the table, someone discusses a new performance in the theatre district. You have information about it from the newspapers. You know the principal actress. You know the controversy. But you volunteer no opinion unless invited. A woman who shares her thoughts on dramatic matters may soon be accused of holding opinions on political affairs. And that, of course, would be inappropriate. So instead, you present a modest smile and ask about his livestock. He talks for 10 minutes. You cut your food into tiny, precise portions and pretend to chew them. You do not finish the plate. You never do, because eating, like everything else, is a performance. Too little, and you seem fragile. Too much, and you appear vulgar. And if you accidentally stain your bodice with gravy, well, you might as well propose to yourself, because nobody else will. The lamps fade slightly. You sense a tension forming behind your eyes, but you preserve your smile. One of the older ladies further down the table has applied too much rice powder. It gathers in the creases near her lips, and someone whispers about it behind a wine glass. A servant momentarily trips while presenting the fish. Nobody acknowledges her. You all act like it did not happen, because the meal is a play and the fantasy must be preserved. Particularly the fantasy that the women at this table are not working hard. Yet you are. You are measuring your every gesture, your every word. You chuckle where expected, drink moderately, nod supportively, and respond to questions with a sort of cultivated neutrality. Inside, you are somewhere else entirely. You remember hearing once that some women consume small doses of the substance, not merely on the face, but ingested to preserve their pale complexion, their eyes luminous, their size diminished. They die gradually, certainly, but gracefully. That seems to be the final goal. After the sweet course, a frozen dessert you barely taste. You rise when the hostess provides the signal. The ladies retreat to the sitting room. The gentlemen stay for tobacco, liquor, and serious conversation. You have never been welcomed to that portion. In the parlour, you sink once more into your seat. Someone starts to play the grand piano. You know the tune intimately. You hum it quietly under your breath, softly enough to seem delightful, but not so boldly as to eclipse the performer. Nobody applauds. They never do. One woman takes out embroidery, and another begins a story regarding her cousin's upcoming wedding. You grin and pass the tea. You do not yawn. You do not slouch. You do not mention the stiffness in your shoulders or the aching in your ankle from shoes that are slightly too small. You are collected. You are pleasant. You are utterly exhausted. But when the men return, smelling of tobacco and declarations, you smile once again. You glance upward. You display a serene, polished version of yourself, the acceptable version, the lovely facade, and they nod as if they comprehend you. They do not. They never do. The following morning comes with the gentle soreness of yesterday's courtesy still lodged between your temples. The scent of burning coal and starch lingers in the corridor. You shift slowly, as if moving through dense fabric. It is another day, another series of obligations, but this one requires a different costume. Today you are charitable. It is scheduled into your week like a fixed appointment. Thursday mornings, charity visits. Friday afternoons, a sewing circle for unfortunate children. Saturday maybe, fundraising for the society supporting destitute gentlewomen. The titles change. The suffering continues. You dress plainly but appropriately because appearance is part of the goodness. No silk today, too worldly. No gems, too vain. You choose a simple day dress with a modest bonnet and gloves that have been laundered, not fresh. Your servant approves. You look appropriately compassionate. Compassion, after all, is also a performance. You climb into the carriage carrying a basket of biscuits and second-hand clothes. You are going to do good works. The street outside smells of damp cobblestones and horse manure. You try not to breathe too deeply as the carriage travels toward the poorer district. The air there is different, thicker, denser, full of smoke from countless chimneys and the smell of bread that is never quite completely baked. Barefoot children dart between carriages. Women with shawls wrapped tight around their faces carry buckets of water up endless staircases. You peer through the window, careful not to gawk. Your heart aches, but you tell yourself this trip matters. You are bringing relief. You reach a mission house, run by the Female Benevolent Society. Inside, it smells of disinfectant and hopelessness. Other women from your social circle are already there, standing in small groups, like blossoms in a desolate field. Mrs. Harrow hands you a clipboard. "If you could help with the sorting," she suggests. Her voice implies that you might otherwise be idle. You walk to the long table where piles of garments await distribution. You pick up a thin, threadbare skirt, mend over mend, and fold it neatly. A young mother steps forward, her face tired but proud. She inquires quietly if she might be allowed one for her daughter. You nod, but Mrs. Harrow shakes her head. We must first verify her worthiness. The woman reddens, whispers an apology, and steps back. You feel a knot form in your stomach. You are supposed to feel virtuous. Instead, you feel powerless, but you stay silent. This is how charity operates here. Not as mercy, but as authority. The poor must demonstrate proper behaviour to receive aid. They must grin, curtsy, express appreciation. Their gratitude must be observable, neat, appropriate for a painting, well, sketch-worthy, since photographs are for the privileged, and your role is to witness it all, to prove that morality exists, that the system works, that your conscience is intact. You pass a loaf to a little girl with grime on her cheek. She takes it wide-eyed and says nothing. You produce the sort of smile that exhausts your facial muscles. God bless you, you whisper softly. But as she rushes back to her mother, you notice the expression the woman gives you. It is not gratitude, it is pity. You try to ignore the feeling, because if you permit yourself to truly sense the inequality, you might find yourself incapable of continuing smiling at all. So you straighten the pile of clothes, retie the cords around the packages, and tell yourself you have done your duty. You have given, you have cared, you have served, haven't you? The day drags on endlessly in the mission house, the kind of exhausting length that feels like penance. You distribute bread, sort clothing, offer quiet words of encouragement to women whose identities you forget the instant they bow before you. The other ladies discuss softly about concerts and recipes. The word poverty never crosses anyone's lips. When the baskets are finally empty, the mood feels less tense. Not because the work is finished, but because the spectacle is over. One by one the women leave, clutching bundles and promises. A few stop as if to thank you, but most rush away. They have lives to continue. You have none to go back to. Not truly. Mrs. Harrow suggests a hot beverage before your departure. You accept. The tea is tepid, the biscuit dry. Still, she radiates satisfaction. It is such a blessing, she sighs, to know we have done good work. You nod, staring at your own image in the moisture-streaked window. You look virtuous, worthy, saved, but you cannot escape the feeling that something is deeply flawed with this kind of generosity, this quiet, polished hunger for others' suffering. The truth is, charity has become an entertainment, a replacement for purpose. The same way embroidery fills empty hours, benevolence fills empty meaning. The poor are simply props in your narrative of goodness. They enter, they struggle, they thank, they exit. On the carriage ride back, the city becomes a haze of smokestacks, grime-covered buildings, gaunt faces at windows. You fantasize for a moment stepping out into that other life, walking until your shoes fall apart, existing without mirrors or etiquette, just breathing without being observed. But then the idea vanishes, buried beneath layers of fine fabric and duty. You return home just before dusk. The house smells faintly of furniture polish and blossoms. The servant takes your cloak. You should feel accomplished. Instead, you feel like you have just come back from a stage play in which everyone acted their part too perfectly. Upstairs, in your small study, you open your private journal. You mean to briefly note your experiences. Something about the dignity of service, perhaps a quote about Christian compassion. But your pen hesitates. The words that emerge are not pious. They are doubts. What if charity were quiet and unwatched? What if help required no audience? What if giving were not a barrier between classes, but a bridge? You close the journal quickly. Dangerous thoughts, these. Better to keep them hidden. Better to be perceived as kind than to risk being perceived as strange. Downstairs, the supper bell chimes. Dinner is ready. You smooth your dress, check your reflection, and walk down the stairs with flawless poise. You will smile when questioned about your day. You will say the needy are thankful. You will say it felt wonderful to help, because that is the answer. That is what is acceptable. And later, when the house goes dark and everyone is asleep, you will sit by the window and think of the woman's expression, the one who showed you compassion, the one who saw past the delicate lace, the one who realized that kind acts performed for show are not kindness at all, but vanity disguised as righteousness. You will not forget her, not tonight, not ever. Night has fallen over the city, and the street lights glow weakly against the wet window panes. You have dressed into your formal evening dress, the one that squeezes a little more around your chest, though you hardly register now. You have been taught not to. The evening dinner was exactly the same as always. Plain food, plain talk, plain courtesy. But tonight your husband appeared distracted, not angry, never angry, just absent. His gaze lingered on the wine more than on you, his voice gentler when speaking to the widow across the table. You tell yourself not to care. That is what every wife tells herself in this house, on this street, in this age. You smile. You agree. You keep your voice level. After all, your function now is consistency, presentation, decorum, and love, if it ever existed, is a private thing, meant to be a recollection, not a demand. Later, when you retire to your private dressing room, you remove your hair and study the mirror. There you are, still young enough to be attractive, but not so young as to be dismissed. You stroke your face, still smooth under the light, and wonder when this silent exhaustion started, the kind you carry like a petticoat. Nobody sees it. You remember your wedding day, the chiming bells, the elegant silk, the thrill of climbing into a carriage with blossoms at your feet. You remember thinking this was the start of everything. You were right, in a sense. It was the start of discovering exactly how limited a life could be when shared with someone who never asked about your dreams. You did not expect romance would continue forever. Nobody does. But you hoped companionship might. A partner who sits nearby, who listens, who actually sees you. Instead, he gazes through you, beyond you toward the smoke curling from his cigar. You have learned not to question things. Wives in this world do not. When a man remains out late at his club, you are meant to be grateful he is among his friends. When he leaves the city for work, you are to stand at the doorway, a smile on your lips, a handkerchief in your palm. When he returns, smelling faintly of a perfume that is not yours, you simply inquire, "Was your trip pleasant?" Nobody mentions it, but every wife knows. Infidelity is like the fog. It rolls in, creeps through small cracks, and lingers even after the sun returns. It is not shameful unless someone names it. Silence preserves dignity. There are women who deliberately overlook it, and women who go mad trying not to. You are somewhere between the two. You write in your private diary instead. Never names, never specifics, just words like emptiness, longing, distance. And sometimes, when you feel courageous, I miss my old self. You once thought about visiting the doctor, not about your husband, naturally, but about your sleeplessness, your weariness, the persistent dull greyness that never quite lifts. He would have suggested rest, maybe a vacation, possibly a women's tonic with alcohol and an opiate, the remedy for everything and nothing. But you did not go because deep down you already understand what troubles you. It is not anxiety, it is not weakness. It is the slow erasure of a self that was never allowed to fully exist. You blow out the candle by the mirror and stand in the darkness. In another room your husband snores softly. You wonder if he dreams of anything you do. You dream of fresh air, of unguarded laughter, of waking one day and feeling entirely, wonderfully alive. You lie awake longer than you should, the ceiling above you black and endless. The clock ticks like a pulse, soft but relentless. Each beat seems to count something. Your patience, your silence, your life. You roll onto your side and watch the dim light from the hall stretch across the carpet. The house is silent except for the faint groan of the pipes and the distant clink of crystal from the drawing room, where your husband sometimes finishes his whiskey alone. You used to join him at first out of affection, then out of duty, now out of apathy. When he finally ascends, it is always the same. The gentle creak of the door, the smell of smoke and alcohol, the careful avoidance of your gaze. He sits on the edge of the bed, pulls off his shoes, says something like, "Long day?" You respond with a nod. You whisper, "Yes." There is no anger between you, only politeness, that most efficient form of separation. You used to think intimacy meant touch and warmth and shared laughter, but in this place, intimacy means tolerance. Two people breathing the same stale air, preserving the illusion of harmony because the alternative would scandalize the block. Sometimes, after he has drifted off, you study his face by the light of the dying candle. The creases at the edges of his mouth, the silver threads woven in his hair. You wonder if he ever watches you when you are asleep. You doubt it. Your own reflection has become your only companion. The mirror listens, at least it does not talk back, does not judge, does not exhale when you ramble too long. You rise silently and move across the floor, pulling a wrap around your shoulders. The night breeze is crisp. You open the diary you hide beneath your needlework and dip your pen into the ink. The nib trembles slightly as you write. He smiled at Mrs. Linton tonight. She giggled too freely. I stayed silent. You pause. You stare at the ink bleeding into the paper. You cross the sentence out. Then you write again. I stayed silent because nobody listens. You close the book. You never sign your name. It is safer that way. Safer to let the words float unclaimed, as if someone else had written them. You think about the other wives. You know how Mrs. Pembroke adds laudanum to her tea, how Miss Carraway pretends to be sick every third week so she can spend a day reading novels in secret. How Mrs. Hartley has begun volunteering at the parish church just to feel useful. None of you are martyrs. None of you are wicked. You are all women enduring within narrow limits, each finding small, invisible ways to avoid being crushed. Your rebellion is quietness, your survival is control. Your truth is that you are not quite broken yet. Downstairs a clock chimes. Midnight. You extinguish the flame and quietly return to the bed beside the man who never really knew you. He moves, half awake, mumbles your name, as if remembering a vision. You shut your eyes. You almost speak, but instead you let the silence reply for you. It does so kindly, without complaint. And for the first time in hours, you drift into sleep. Morning appears again. The same light, the same air, the same pattern of footsteps in the hall. But beneath the calm, something pulses differently. A restlessness you cannot name, like a curtain slightly stirring. When all the windows are locked, you dress carefully. The servant tightens your corset, her movements quick, her face emotionless. You watch her in the glass and wonder, as you often do, what she thinks when she sees you. She won't look at you. None of them will. But she sees everything, more than you'd care to admit. She's noticed the stains on the linens, the rips in your bedding, the slight trembling in your hands. Servants always see. They're taught to watch without showing it. Below, the house is already moving. The cook bangs pots loudly in the kitchen. Someone sweeps the hallway. Somewhere, a baby wails. Your neighbours, not yours, you can tell by the pitch. You come down the stairs, gloved and pressed, stepping carefully to miss the faint creak of the third step. Your husband has already left, his cane and hat gone from their place. The butler gives a small nod. He's gone to town, madam. Naturally. You enter the breakfast room, but the smell of last night's fire and this morning's grease turns your stomach. You can't stay seated, so you drift through the parlour, past the portraits, into the rear corridor. You pause near the servants' entrance. The noise of living is louder here. Rattling plates, hushed voices, the hiss of boiling water. You've been told never to linger past this threshold. It disrupts the natural order. But you stay anyway. You hear laughter, not the strained polite laughter of your drawing room. Real laughter, full-bodied, rough-edged, alive. For a second you want it. Then you catch another sound, a muffled sob coming from the washing room beyond. You pause, then ease the door open slightly. A young scullery maid, barely 16, is crouched on the floor, scrubbing a copper pot so hard her knuckles are raw. She doesn't notice you. You ask gently, "Are you hurt?" She jumps, startled, and tucks her hands behind her apron. "No, ma'am, just clumsy." Her voice quivers. You know that tone, the sound of someone afraid of being punished. You glance around. The floor is slick with suds, the air thick with heat and steam. You catch her reflection in the wash basin, eyes swollen, shoulders hunched, her blouse soaked through. You understand this weariness. You understand this quiet. It wears a different face, but it's the same burden. For a heartbeat, you want to say something kind, something real, but the words lodge in your throat. You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't see this. So you murmur instead, "Watch that soap. It's harsh on the skin." She nods quickly, relieved but wary. You turn and go. Back in the corridor, the stillness feels thicker than before. You realise that under all the polished manners, your whole house runs on hidden pain, on people who can never be tired, who can never cry, who can never be anything but their assigned function. And you are one of them too. Your dress is nicer, your hands softer, but you're no freer than the girl in the scullery. Both of you are confined by expectation, hers of service, yours of appearance, both punished for stepping outside the part. You stand there, pulse faint, until the butler reappears at the corridor's end. He bows slightly. "Madam, the coal delivery is here," and like that, the moment ends. You nod, smile faintly, return to the parlour. By the time you settle again, your face has resumed its practised composure. But your hands, they're trembling just a little. You tuck them under your gloves. The day moves forward in perfect, airless routine. The servants rush, the clock chimes, the house hums like a great machine wound too tight. And you, the lady of it all, are its silent centre, refined, necessary. You spend an hour sorting letters, another writing none of them. You pace the length of the parlour, once, twice, again. You adjust the curtains, though the light was already fine. It's not the fabric that bothers you, it's the motionlessness. Something in the air feels broken. You think of the girl in the scullery, her bleeding hands, the way she buried her pain, as though it were shameful. You can almost feel the heat of that room still pressed against your skin. But what troubles you most isn't her exhaustion, it's your helplessness. You had all the power except the one that mattered to make a difference. You try to dismiss the thought. Women of your class aren't supposed to dwell on the lives of servants. It's unhealthy. Your mother once warned to let compassion become a distraction. A household needs firm boundaries, she told you, or it falls into chaos. But you're beginning to think the chaos is already here, just better hidden. This house is a performance. Upstairs, you play the picture of grace. Downstairs, they act the unseen hands who keep it clean. And every day the line between your worlds gets thinner. You remember something the cook once muttered when she thought you weren't listening. "We work to make them perfect and they still see mistakes." You didn't get it then, you do now. You pour yourself a cup of tea, but your hands shake just enough to make the china clink against the saucer. A tiny noise, but in this silence, it echoes. You drink anyway, hoping the warmth will calm your nerves. It doesn't. Across the room, you notice a smudge of ash on the wall beside the fireplace. It'll bother you all day. You think about calling the maid to wipe it, but the image of her raw hands scrubbing the plaster makes you push the bell away. You'll clean it yourself, you decide. Later, when nobody's around. When did you begin hiding kindness like it was shameful? The answer comes quickly. Around the time you realise that compassion spoken out loud is social death. There are women who never grasp this lesson. Mrs. Linton, for example. She once paid for a servant's dying child to see a doctor, and the whispers haven't stopped. So overly sentimental, they said. So reckless, as if kindness were a disease. You shut your eyes and listen. Somewhere a baby cries again, the same one from earlier. Somewhere a clock strikes, low and steady. The sound moves through the house, through your bones. For a second, you imagine you can hear the pulse of all those invisible hands. Scrubbing, ironing, cooking, dusting, working in rhythm with what you think is the real heartbeat of this life. Not love, not faith, not beauty. Labour, unrewarded, unseen, endless. And yet you're part of it. You permit it. You depend on it. You wonder if that makes you guilty or just another piece polished and perfumed to hide the same grinding down. Outside, the carriage wheels clatter over the rough stones. A dog howls. The city breathes its smoke into the fading light. You rise, walk to the window and press your palm against the glass. Down below, a servant hurries across the courtyard carrying a bucket too heavy for her frame. The weight tilts her body sideways, but she keeps going. You could call down to her, offer help, ask her name. You don't. Instead, you whisper to the face staring back at you. We're both carrying something, aren't we? And then, because it's all you're capable of, you step back from the window before anyone sees. The following morning starts with a letter. Folded cream paper, lightly scented with something that used to be expensive. It's from Mrs. Winthrop announcing a ladies' gathering, the kind of event that pretends to be about education but is really about power. You know this before you finish the first sentence. You'll go, of course, you always do. It's not about friendship, it's about being seen. Staying away suggests something's wrong. Showing up, even silently, keeps your place in the circle. The gathering will be at her house on a certain avenue, a grand residence famous for its enormous chandelier and its icy rooms. You dress carefully. Something refined but not showy. Pale blue with thin lace at the wrists that suggests modesty while hinting at cost. The carriage ride there feels longer than usual. The city slides past, a dull patchwork of rooftops, smoke, hanging laundry, and the odd black umbrella. It's drizzling lightly, and every block smells faintly of coal and boiled cabbage. When you arrive, the drawing room is already crowded with women. Silk rustles, fans flutter, laughter drifts through the air like perfume. A servant takes your shawl, and you step into the role again. The topic of the day is the cultivation of the feminine mind. You almost laugh. You've watched this act before. It's a careful kind of rebellion, the sort that keeps one foot firmly planted. Inside the parlour, Mrs. Winthrop herself starts, her voice calm and measured. We women, though delicate, are not incapable of shaping influence. Through grace, conduct, and restraint, we can uplift society. The room hums with approval. Everyone agrees. They have to. But then Mrs. Grafton, with her sharp gaze, narrow lips, and perpetually outdated dress, dares to add, and perhaps in time we might deserve the vote as well. The silence that follows could curdle cream. Mrs. Winthrop's smile freezes. Ah, she finally says, let us not stray into such political matters. We must preserve our natural refinement. You drop your gaze, though your pulse quickens, not from fear, but from something like recognition. Because refinement, that tiresome word, is just control dressed up as virtue. You listen as the conversation shifts back to safer ground. Appropriate literature, proper etiquette, suitable education for young women. Every sentence feels like a retreat. Every time the talk edges toward equality, someone smothers it with a silk handkerchief. You sip your tea. You nod when expected, but inside something is stirring. It's small, barely noticeable, like the first crack in fine porcelain. A thought that doesn't belong here, a question without permission to exist. What if refinement isn't virtue? What if obedience isn't goodness? What if all this ritual, these endless hours of measured speech and careful clothing, aren't safety but prison? The thought scares you, not because it's false, but because it feels so true. You glance around the room. Mrs. Grafton meets your eye. Just for an instant. A flicker of shared understanding passes between you, a brief silent acknowledgement that neither of you buys this charade anymore. And then it's over. Mrs. Winthrop calls for applause. Everyone claps. You join in, but your hands feel cold. On the carriage ride home, the rain has cleared, but the streets shine with reflected light. You stare out the window at the wet cobblestones, at the hazy shapes of women rushing through the mist, and you think maybe something is beginning to crack beneath all the curtsies and the speeches. Perhaps it starts with a single question you can't quite shake that evening. The question stays with you. It follows you up the stairs into the dimly lit sanctuary of your bedroom, into the mirror as you take down your hair. What if refinement isn't virtue? What if this entire existence, this fragile dance of appearances and manners, has nothing to do with goodness at all and everything to do with control? You sit at the vanity, the lamp catching the silver of your brush. Your reflection looks back, flawless as ever, but your face feels strange. Like someone you've been pretending to be for years and can't quite remember how to stop. You think of Mrs. Grafton's voice, steady, brave, too honest for the room. You remember the way every head turned toward her, as if she'd said something obscene. You wonder what it took for her to speak that one line. You imagine her ride home, her husband waiting with his questions, her neighbours whispering about invitations that might not come next season, and still she said it. You respect her for that. You stand and move to the writing desk lit by a single wavering candle. You open your diary, the same one you've been quietly filling for weeks, and dip your pen in the ink. This time, you don't pause. What if we stopped calling submission refinement? What if silence wasn't peace but punishment? What if virtue meant something bigger than this? The words come faster than you expect. They spill out smooth, controlled, but burning faintly. You name no one, you plan nothing. You write only the truth as you've begun to see it. You stop. The house creaks softly. You hear your husband's footsteps somewhere down the corridor. You blow gently on the ink until it sets, then close the diary and tuck it into the secret drawer of your sewing case. If someone found it, you'd be destroyed. A woman with thoughts too large for her place is dangerous to herself and everyone else. You'd be labelled fanciful, hysterical, discontent, whatever word makes them most comfortable. You smile at the absurdity of it. The same world that celebrates a woman for stitching roses on fabric fears her if she dares to write a thought. Instead, you rise and cross to the window. The city outside hums faintly, gaslights glowing through the fog. Somewhere past the rooftops, a train whistles, a reminder that the world is moving even if your own life feels frozen. You rest your forehead against the cool glass and breathe slowly. It's frightening, this shift inside you, but it's also thrilling, like waking from a sleep you didn't know you were in. You think of all the other women, Mrs. Grafton with her fierce eyes, the governess with her ink-stained fingers, the maid with her scarred hands, and wonder if they feel it too, this quiet, rising tremor beneath the surface of their lives. You whisper softly, maybe someday. The words fog the glass, then disappear. The clock strikes 10. You snuff the lamp, climb into bed. Your husband is already asleep, mouth half open, the scent of whiskey faint around him. You pull the blankets up to your throat and close your eyes. For the first time in years. Your final thought before sleep isn't about propriety. It's about what could be, and that you realise is its own small revolution. The next morning arrives, grey and hesitant, as if the sun itself isn't sure. You wake before the servant's bell, your mind already stirring, the weight of last night's thoughts still softly pulsing under your skin. You try to follow your routine, dress, wash, arrange your face, but every movement feels like mimicry, a thin copy of a life that started to slip quietly out of alignment. You keep catching yourself pausing, staring, thinking. The questions you scribbled last night are still there, hidden in your sewing case. You can almost feel them there, ticking like a small clock. In the stillness of breakfast, the world looks the same. The marmalade gleams, the silver sparkles. The newspaper sits folded beside your husband's teacup. But when he clears his throat and begins to read aloud, something about a parliamentary speech, you listen differently this morning. He reads with the ease of a man who believes his words carry weight. You drink your tea and let your eyes settle on the paper, not the text, but the gaps between them, the whiteness that contains all the things left unspoken. You suddenly picture what it would be like if women's names filled those gaps, not as wives or patrons or anonymous helpers, but as voices, distinct, layered, real. You almost smile at yourself. The idea feels risky, even here, across the table from a man who wouldn't call it risk at all, just nonsense. He folds the paper, sips again, and says casually, "Mrs. Winthrop's gathering was well regarded yesterday, I'm told. A sensible woman, that one. You nearly choke on your tea." Sensible. The word lands like a blow. He means it as praise, naturally. Sensible is the greatest compliment for a woman in your circle. It means safe, predictable, controlled. A woman who will never cause trouble. You murmur agreement, though your chest tightens, because you've begun to understand what happens to sensible women. They fade into their own compliance. They shrink until they fit neatly into the shape society carved for them. And then they vanish behind it completely. You look toward the window where the mist has thickened into a grey curtain. Somewhere out there, the factory bells are ringing. Somewhere, girls your age are walking to work, scarves knotted tight, breath rising in pale clouds. They aren't free, not really, but they're present. They exist in the world's noise, not its hush. You envy them. After your husband leaves for his office, you wander through the house. The floorboards groan under your shoes. The paintings on the walls seem to watch you, their painted faces locked in generations of decorum. You stop before one of your grandmother, painted before her marriage. She looks bold, almost defiant, chin lifted, eyes blazing. You were always told she was difficult. It was spoken with scorn. But you see it differently now. You think maybe she wasn't tamed so much as buried. And that realization lights something small and reckless inside you. You walk to the piano and raise the lid. Your fingers hover over the keys. You haven't played in months, not properly. Music has always felt like an indulgence, but now it feels essential. You press one key, then another. Slowly, sound spreads through the room. A minor chord, soft and uncertain but alive. The maid walks past the doorway, hesitates for a second to listen, then moves on. You keep playing. You don't care if the sound carries through the house. You don't care if anyone hears. You're not performing. Not today. For the first time, you're playing for yourself. The melody builds, awkward at first, your fingers stiff, unsure. But then something loosens. The music starts to pour out of you, shaky and raw, flooding the parlour in waves. It's clumsy, imperfect, human, but it's yours. For a breath, you forget where you are. You forget the walls, the rules, the tightness of the stays around your ribs. There's only rhythm, air, sound. You feel your heartbeat matching it, wild and free, as if it's been waiting forever to be heard. You close your eyes and disappear into it. But then footsteps. The music cuts off mid-phrase. The silence rushes back, hard and instant. Your fingers lock above the keys. It's your husband. He stands in the doorway, hat still on, his face unreadable. "I thought you didn't play in the mornings," he says mildly, though his voice carries a weight you know instantly. "I wanted to," you reply quietly. He glances toward the window, as if the sound must have reached the neighbours. "It's quite loud," he says after a beat. "You'll wake the household." You want to laugh, to tell him the house has been awake for decades, coiling itself around both of you, rigid and stifling and full of shadows. But you just lower your eyes and nod. "Of course," he smiles, barely, pleased. "I prefer you when you're still. You have such a gentle manner." The compliments cut deep, sharper because they're meant to cage you. He exits shortly after, leaving you there with your hands hovering above the keys, the music's echo dissolving. The quiet grows oppressive, like the walls are closing in. You press a key gently, then another. No tune emerges, only resistance dressed as noise. Once he's gone, you play again, but so softly that the sound belongs to you alone. A secret exchange between yourself and the piano, between you and the person you almost forgot. When you finally pause, your fingers throb, but something in your chest has shifted, become lighter, freer, as if a sleeping part of you has finally stirred. You stand from the bench and catch yourself in the window's reflection. The grey sky beyond appears almost silver now, the smallest trace of brightness cutting through. It strikes you suddenly that freedom doesn't need to announce itself like a storm. It can begin as something modest, a sound, a phrase, a thought. You will not be muted. That night, after the lamps glow and the household returns to its careful patterns, you open your sewing box and pull out your journal. Once more you find a blank page. No trembling now. The pen sits steady in your grip. If my voice cannot rise, I will write in whispers. You start. If I cannot leave, I will build an exit through language. You hesitate, then deliberately inscribe your own name below. This time, you leave nothing hidden. You shut the journal, tuck it under your pillow, and sit in the calm that follows the subtle scent of ink, the murmur of distant rainfall, the fading pulse of melody still hanging in the room. Everything, the music, the hush, the yearning feels transformed now. Not diminished, not infinite, just present. You smile. It's not a practiced smile. Not polite, not proper. It's real. And while nothing around you has shifted, you have. The following days feel altered, not in ways anyone else would notice, but in ways that matter to you. The air seems sharper, the silence feels fragile, like fabric pulled taut just before it splits. You move through your expected routines, social calls, correspondence, needlework circles, but underneath each action pulses a new consciousness, a hidden tempo no one else can detect. It's like moving through familiar spaces but suddenly seeing every bolted door. Your husband remains oblivious. Why wouldn't he? The rebellion you've launched is imperceptible. You still smile, still agree, still execute your part perfectly. But each word you record now, each notion you refuse to suppress, burns like a small fire, a match in a wooden structure. This morning, while he conducts business with a guest in his study, you steal upstairs with your journal. The household staff are occupied. No one questions you. You close your sitting room door and push the window open completely. The frigid air sweeps in, carrying the faraway sounds of wagon wheels and merchants shouting their wares. Existence, raw and unrefined. You dip your pen and start writing again, not just musings this time, but statements that push back, that challenge. It cannot be righteousness to erase oneself. It cannot be tranquility to exist invisible. We name it grace, because we lack another term for compliance. Wrapped in silk. You stop, listening. Nothing. No approaching steps, no tapping, just the gentle scratch of your pen. You keep going. You remember Mrs. Grafton again, the courage in her bearing, the way she regarded you across that filled room, as if she actually perceived you for the first time. You wonder how many other women are concealing journals similar to yours, distributed throughout the city, crammed with words too threatening to voice openly. You picture them hidden in embroidery baskets, slipped behind devotional books, inserted between cooking notes, thoughts disguised as duty, aspiration disguised as tradition. Maybe you're not isolated. Maybe none of you are. You write more rapidly now, ink staining your hands. You don't mind. If the world refuses to hear us speak, we will murmur. If it denies our visibility, we will exist in the spaces between. And eventually they will uncover our words and understand we were present all along. You close the journal and press your hand against its surface, sensing the subtle warmth of your own heartbeat through it. You nearly laugh at the audacity of what you've accomplished. Nothing beyond a few pages of ink, yet it seems like the first authentic thing you've ever made. Downstairs, the bell signals luncheon. You rise, straighten your clothes, and scan the room to confirm nothing looks disturbed. To any observer, everything remains unchanged. A tidy space, a polished desk, a proper wife. But you understand the reality now. You've created something invisible to them, a concealed existence within the apparent one. As you descend the stairs, the maid acknowledges you with a quiet nod. You hold her gaze momentarily, longer than typical. She appears surprised, then returns the smile, an authentic smile, the kind you haven't exchanged with anyone in ages. For a fleeting instant you sense it, that connection you once pictured between the worlds above and below the staircase. Two women, separate constraints, one recognition. At the table, your husband glances up from his newspaper. "You seem cheerful today," he observes, somewhat surprised. "I believe I am," you respond, settling into your chair. He doesn't inquire further. He never does. But this time, you're grateful. You want this secret preserved, a small burning coal hidden beneath layers of silk and propriety. It isn't freedom yet, but it's the start of it. That night, when the household finally descends into its customary quiet, you sit beside the dim light of a single candle, journal resting in your lap, pulse steady but alive. You're not concealing now, you're creating. You've started to envision what these words might become if they ever escaped this room. Perhaps not a volume, perhaps not even correspondence. Maybe just a murmur that finds another woman's attention, something that declares, "You are not insane, you are not solitary. It is the world that is too narrow." You run your finger along the page's edge, fingertips lightly marked with ink. There is strength in this trace, you think, evidence of your own creation, unapproved and unrevised. Outside, a carriage rumbles past, wheels slick against the stones. Somewhere distant, church bells sound the hour. You think of all the women hearing those same bells, counting the same hours, questioning when, if ever, their lives will become their own. The notion grounds you. You turn the page and start anew. They inform us that our duty is to preserve the comfort of men. But comfort built on silence isn't comfort. It is captivity. They instruct us to be grateful, refined, virtuous. But virtue without freedom is submission wearing decoration. The words feel dangerous, like captured flame. You don't hesitate. You continue until the candle dwindles and your fingers hurt. The room carries the faint smell of wax and resistance. Then you detect it. Footsteps in the corridor, your husband's, solid and deliberate. You snap the journal closed and slip it beneath a folded shawl. Just as the door swings open, he enters, already in his dressing gown, eyebrows lifted, still awake. You smile faintly. "Couldn't sleep," he chuckles, the sound gentle but patronizing. "Too much contemplation will disturb your rest. You understand that, my dear?" "I understand," you answer, your voice smooth as your tea's surface. He kisses your head briefly, absently, and departs again. The door shuts. The atmosphere changes. You wait a full minute before breathing out. You retrieve the journal, pulse still racing, and hide it deeper in its spot. You will continue writing tomorrow and every day after. You don't know what it will achieve, or if anyone will ever discover it, but that doesn't matter. You have started. In the mirror across the room, you glimpse your reflection, the faint shimmer of candlelight dancing across your face. You look neither fragile nor frightened now. You look conscious. It's startling, that awareness, to recognize yourself as something beyond decoration, beyond a function. You whisper quietly into the stillness. "They will never understand me." It isn't sorrow this time. It's defiance, because now you comprehend yourself. Tomorrow you will still smile at the morning table. You will still serve tea, still agree, still attend. But every action will bear a concealed significance, a private history, a testament that while they assume you compliant, You are occupied, building something no one can eliminate. The world beyond may never encounter your words, but eventually someone will discover them in a chest or a drawer or beneath a loose board and recognize that even within the harshest boundaries women were considering, imagining, recording. And perhaps when that moment arrives, they will comprehend. History was not shaped only by those who declared loudly, it was preserved by those who murmured. You extinguish the candle. The smoke rises, faint and fragrant in the darkness. The silence feels whole, not hollow. You close your eyes. You are no longer merely enduring. You are evolving. The days proceed in their familiar pattern. Visits, letters, pleasant conversation. But something within you resonates differently now. The former silence no longer resembles safety. It resembles dormancy. And you have started, very quietly, to rouse. It begins with minor gestures. You start to articulate a bit more distinctly. At gatherings, when someone remarks that women are too sentimental for governance, you let your smile fade just enough to create unease. You stop saying sorry when you take the final pastry. You stop dropping your eyes when men interrupt you. They perceive it not immediately, but gradually, like birds disturbed from a meadow. Mrs. Winthrop mentions that you seem vigorous lately, her voice pointed beneath the politeness. Another woman calls you independent, which sounds like both praise and caution. You act as if you haven't heard either, but internally you feel something fierce emerge, a flash of satisfaction. You have begun writing daily now, not only after dark, but sometimes in the mornings, before the household wakes. You write in cipher, small fragments masked as written prayers or shopping lists, expressions that mean nothing to anyone else. 3 apples for the market actually means. 3 concepts that unsettle me but must be documented. Your words are multiplying across the pages faster than you can control them. Sometimes they alarm you. Sometimes they anchor you. Always they confirm that you exist. One afternoon, Mrs. Grafton arrives unexpectedly. The maid announces her with a hint of surprise. You haven't encountered her since the advancement of the female mind gathering where she nearly sparked an uprising with one statement. She steps into your drawing room with composed confidence, rain still glistening on her cloak. You offer tea, but she politely declines. I did not arrive for tea, she states softly. Her eyes momentarily scan the writing desk, then return to you. Do you still contemplate that day? You nod. She smiles faintly. So do I. I believed I was the only one. The two of you converse carefully at first, dancing around the forbidden subject, but quickly the space fills with honesty. You discuss literature, about isolation, about how women's existences are arranged like gallery exhibits. You talk about the hunger for something you cannot quite name. It feels precarious, this dialogue, like balancing on the edge of a cliff, but also exhilarating. Mrs. Grafton leans nearer, her voice lowering. I've been meeting with a few women, discreetly, to discuss education reform, writing workshops. Nothing revolutionary, of course. Her eyes gleam with irony. You both recognise that in this world a woman reading the wrong text is revolutionary enough. You pause. The words yes and no battle in your throat. Finally you ask, do you believe it is safe? She smiles, just slightly. No, but that is not equivalent to impossible. The statement hangs between you like a beacon. When she departs an hour later, your heartbeat is still rapid. You remain by the door long after her carriage has vanished, fingers pressed against the wood as if attempting to preserve the moment. Safe and impossible. You repeat the words to yourself again. They sound like a resolution. That evening you retrieve your journal and inscribe a new line, different from all the previous ones. Not observation, not contemplation, but pledge. I will not spend my existence waiting to be granted permission. You underline it once, then close the book. You have no notion what you will do next, but for the first time, that ambiguity feels like emancipation, not anxiety. The next morning dawns, soft and grey. A low mist wraps along the street, dampening sound and blurring the boundaries of everything. You sit beside the window in your robe, tea growing cold beside you, journal open. The ink shimmers wetly in the early light. You read over what you inscribed last night. I will not spend my existence waiting to be granted permission. The words appear both delicate and resolute, like a bridge constructed of glass. But as you trace them with your fingertip, you feel something solid form beneath the apprehension, determination. You don't need to deliver speeches or force open barriers to alter things. You can begin small, the way every genuine revolution begins, in whispers. When your husband materializes in the doorway, you close the journal calmly. He inquires if you are coming to breakfast. You nod. He doesn't observe the ink mark on your hand. At the table, he discusses finance and railway systems. You listen politely, but your thoughts are elsewhere. When he inquires if you will be home this afternoon, you respond honestly, no. He glances up, surprised. No, I am visiting Mrs. Grafton, you state, your tone gentle but certain. She is beginning a reading circle. He frowns slightly, as if the notion doesn't align with his world structure. For what purpose? To read, you reply, simply meeting his gaze. And to contemplate. The silence that ensues feels like an examination, but you don't fill it. You have discovered that silence can be a tool too. After a moment he shrugs. Well, as long as it is respectable. You smile a small private smile and finish your tea. Respectable. How generous that word sounds when uttered by someone who never has to prove it. Later, as the carriage moves toward Mrs. Grafton's house, the city feels almost alive again. The rain has stopped. Market women announce prices from beneath striped awnings. A boy dashes past with a bundle of papers, ink fresh on his fingers. You wonder if your words could ever travel like that, beyond walls, beyond whispers. When you arrive, there are only 4 women assembled around the fire. They greet you cautiously, with a kind of warmth that hides its flame until it is certain it is safe to burn. On the table before them lie books, some poems, some essays, one well-worn copy of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman. You pick it up. The cover is soft from handling, the margins filled with pencil marks. You glance up. You have all read this. Mrs. Grafton nods. We are reading it again. You sit. You open the book. The pages rustle softly as you turn them. As you begin to read aloud, something within you eases for the first time. Your voice sounds like it belongs in the space. The others listen, not as though you are breaking a rule, but as though you are joining a chorus that has been waiting centuries to be acknowledged. You don't know what will emerge from this. Perhaps nothing, perhaps everything, but you can sense it, the world shifting by degrees, one woman's breath at a time. Later that evening, when you return home, you open your journal once more. You write slowly, intentionally, savouring the words, "Today I spoke without requesting permission and the sky did not collapse." You close the book and slip it beneath your pillow again. The air carries the faint smell of rain and ink. You lie back and listen to the city breathing beyond your window. The carriages, the bells, the soft whisper of a world that has no awareness what is approaching. And you smile because you comprehend. The house is dark now. The city too. All the activity and routine of the day has folded itself into a gentle, breathing silence. You rest there, the trace of ink still on your fingertips, the whisper of words still resonating somewhere beneath your heart. Outside, a lamp flickers in the mist. Inside, the clock ticks on, but softly now, less a command, more a lullaby. You think of the women you have met, the governess with ink-stained hands, the maid with calloused fingers, Mrs. Grafton's unwavering gaze. You think of every quiet rebellion that filled a diary, every forbidden sentence that refused to die, every act of grace that was really courage in disguise. And you understand now that you belong to them, not by blood ties, but by resilience, by the quiet, steady pulse of thought that no corset, no etiquette, no era could completely silence. You let the stillness settle over you, heavy but comforting, the kind of quiet that feels earned. The night deepens. The rain begins again, soft against the glass. You imagine the ink in your journal drying completely, your words safe and waiting. Someday, perhaps, someone will discover them. Maybe a daughter or a stranger or a woman, centuries from now, who recognizes herself in your voice. You hope she does. You close your eyes. The room fades, the world softens, and all that remains is the rhythm of breath, the pulse of potential. The story is not finished, but for now it can rest.